I have created scientific magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 401. Do you want your fighter jet to fly as fast as light? While Orlando and the others were eavesdropping, Lydia, who was controlling the first-generation fighter plane in the sky, gradually became familiar with the big toy under her, and soon began to test the combat. Lydia pressed the wrench of the engine control directly to the bottom, increased the speed to the limit, and then dived down. The entire fuselage was like a huge eagle, falling from the sky at a high speed, causing a huge sound of breaking through the air, but the next moment it was covered by the sound of machine guns on both sides of the wings. The stone road surface, reinforced by magic, was immediately hit with potholes. Lydia stretched the body with great excitement, changing from rapid descent to rapid ascent. The fighter passed by only 30 meters above the ground. Seeing Orlando and others, they were terrified, fearing that this thing would lose control and fall down. Their worries did not come true. Although it was the first time for Lydia to fly a real fighter, her operation skills were not weak. She easily completed the dangerous action of flying close to the ground, and before completely leaving the ground, she opened the bomb bay at the bottom of the fuselage and threw several incendiary bombs down, accompanied by bursts of piercing explosions. About a quarter of the runway surface was instantly covered with fierce white phosphorus fire. In order to pursue the ultimate speed, the fighter's load capacity is limited, and the shrapnel bombs it carries are only enough for this attack. However, according to their original design, this thing should not have a bomb bay. After all, the focus of the first generation of fighters is to eliminate threats from the air, and the rest can be left to the airship. The purpose of making it is obviously to deliver another killer weapon. At this moment in the valley, Vittorio, Orlando and the alchemists who were watching were extremely satisfied with the performance of this new aircraft. After watching it for a while, only Lin En looked at the runway that was on fire and had craters, and his face showed helplessness. You blew up the runway. What about landing? Lydia, who was proudly admiring the shooting results in the sky, also suddenly thought of this. As the designer and maker of the fighter blueprint, Lydia naturally knew that this thing must be taken off and landed on a very flat road. If you are not careful, the end result will be the destruction of the aircraft and the death of people. And this valley, in addition to the runway that was newly repaired by magic, is full of soft and uneven soil, and there are trees blocking it. It is not a place to land at all. Lydia had no choice but to continue to wander in the sky, waiting for the wizards below to repair the runway. But after circling in the sky for several times, there was no movement. Just as she was getting anxious and preparing to fly back to the capital and make an emergency landing on the city square, Lin En used magic to remove the burning flames and repair the damaged runway. After the fighter successfully landed, Lydia, who was excited before, was left with only fear. The speed of the fighter is extremely fast, which is its advantage, but sometimes it is also a disadvantage. At a very high speed, even hitting a flying bird may cause death. Lin En reminded seriously. Lydia's talent in engineering is self-evident, but she is easily carried away when she is happy, which is taboo for pilots. It is necessary to consider adding a parachute or something in case of emergency, and with magic such as slow fall, the pilot can save his life when encountering danger. Most of the time, the person who controls the weapon is much more important than the weapon itself. The higher the level of industry, the more so. This new type of aircraft needs to rely on a runway to take off and land, which is a big flaw. Vittorio suggested that since the aircraft is made of metal, maybe we can try to add electromagnetic magic to the fuselage and use electromagnetic propulsion to send the fighter directly into the sky. Are you talking about electromagnetic catapult launch? Lin En immediately understood what Vittorio meant, but still shook his head and rejected it. The speed of this aircraft is too slow, and the instantaneous acceleration is far from enough. The only result is that it is sent directly into the sky and falls down. Those who can use electromagnetic catapult technology are hypersonic fighters with speeds of several Mach or even tens of Mach per second. Using jet propulsion, they can instantly accelerate to a point that is enough to support the flight of the aircraft. It's better to save money on this propeller plane. Seeing that Lin En rejected his proposal, Vittorio didn't care. What really made him feel a little incomprehensible was that Lin En actually felt that the speed of the new aircraft with a speed of 360 km per hour was too slow. If this is called slow, then what else can be called fast? Could it be possible to expect this steel box flying in the sky to run like light, circling the continent 7.5 times per second? Orlando and others also put forward various suggestions for improvement, which is why Lin En invited them. Some of these suggestions are wild and illogical, but some of them are practical ideas. For example, optical invisibility, which has been realized on airships, and adding laser launchers to fighter jets. Both of these can greatly improve the survival and combat capabilities of fighter jets without adding too much weight and affecting the performance of aircraft. The happiest person is naturally Lydia. In her opinion, the biggest disadvantage of this fighter jet is not that it needs a runway to land, but that its combat endurance is too poor. There is only one shrapnel shell that can be used. If the machine gun is used continuously, the ammunition is only enough for 1 minute. After it is used up, it loses the ability to attack and can only be used for reconnaissance. Otherwise it must return to the base for resupply. This is the so-called flying for a few hours and having a happy minute. But if it is equipped with a laser launcher, it will be different. After the ammunition is used up, it can still fight the enemy closely, just like the bayonet on a musket. That's the kind of battle that can make people's blood boil. With the brains and suggestions of a group of alchemists, the magic improvement plan was produced in just 2 hours. Of course, it will take another week to draw the alchemy array on the body, plus the subsequent debugging. Won't that make it late for the next battle? Lydia said, quite depressed. She stayed up late for several days to rush to make it, just to catch up with the first battle. To recapture the kingdom, you don't need something as high-end as a fighter, Lin En said with a smile. Their opponents are just a group of kingdom nobles who jump back and forth and change their minds according to the situation. When they really attack the empire, this thing will show its power. And what's the use of a fighter? If you want to ensure air superiority, a formation is at least. Chapter 402, Sound the clarion call for counterattack. In mid-August, in the eastern part of the kingdom of Hadrada, in the steel city of Sirtot, Marquis Ulysses had not been able to sleep well for more than a month. In recent times, the situation in the entire kingdom has been turbulent, and the speed of change is really unbelievable. Half a year ago, the lords of the kingdom were still standing in line and discussing the competition for the position of crown prince. As a neutral party, Ulysses was not very interested in who would be the king. After all, the decree from the capital had little impact on them, the border lords. But he did not expect that the second Prince Hatcher would have the courage to collude with the notorious wizard, and even capture the capital and kill King Basil. This move shocked the entire kingdom. Although their new king claimed to the outside world that it was the cardinal of the great Prince United Church who committed the horrific act of patricide, and he ascended the throne by rectifying the chaos. But this poor excuse is afraid that even the ignorant people cannot be fooled. This move will inevitably incur the wrath of the church. In view of this, Ulysses pretended to obey Hatcher's call and returned to the kingdom's rule, but in fact he joined forces with some border nobles to report the news of the kingdom's fall. When Edwell led the expeditionary army to kill, Ulysses chose to welcome the king without hesitation. He was very clear about the power of the empire and the church. Those evil gods believers could certainly show off their power for a while and commit the tragedy of killing the king in the kingdom, but as long as the church's army arrived, they would be slaughtered in an instant. Ulysses was so convinced, but less than a month later, he received news that the church's expeditionary army was defeated and even annihilated. At the moment he received the news, Ulysses collapsed. He couldn't believe that such a powerful expeditionary army would suffer a tragic defeat, and even suspected that the spies would unite to make up a story to deceive himself. After confirming that the news was accurate, Ulysses fell into great panic, and at the same time faced an extremely important choice. Should he continue to obey the instructions of the church, or turn around and run to the arms of the new king? As a qualified noble, Ulysses does not have a mental cleanliness disorder. Whether it is a lowly assassin or a notorious wizard, as long as he can be used, he has always accepted everyone. As for the belief in God, of course there is, but not much. After the defeat of the expeditionary army, this piety is even less. Insisting on standing on the side of the victor is the secret of the Ulysses family's survival for hundreds of years and its continuous growth. However, Ulysses finally chose to wait and see, because in the past month, the wizards who won the first battle did not make any movement. This made him begin to wonder whether these evil god believers were also severely damaged in that war, so they dared not step out of the capital. Ulysses, dressed in pajamas, paced in the huge manor. Not long after, he received the news that his spies had returned. He did not even bother to change his clothes. He quickly summoned them and asked anxiously, "What is the situation in the capital now? Are there any unusual movements by King Hatter and the wizards?" Reporting to the Lord, the army led by the minions of the evil god has left the capital. It is roughly estimated that there are more than 30,000 people. They are divided into 3 legions. 2 of them are temporarily missing. The sturdy knight half knelt on the ground and reported in a low voice, "Isn't it missing?" Ulysses frowned in dissatisfaction. It should be difficult to hide the movement of such a large army. "What about the remaining legion? Did they lose it too?" Ulysses asked coldly. "Lord, they are behind," the knight said hesitantly. "Behind?" Ulysses was stunned. "They are outside the city now. There are only less than 10 kilometers left to the Iron City," the sturdy knight answered cautiously. "Outside the city? So fast?" Ulysses's eyes widened with fear. "The capital is 200 kilometers away from here, and there is the earldom of Hansen in between, with 5 fortified cities and more than 20 towns. Could it be that this army of tens of thousands of people suddenly flew over?" Ulysses instantly thought of the intelligence he had obtained before, the alchemical creation that was said to be bigger than a house but could fly in the sky. He immediately rushed out, rode the best war horse in the manor, and arrived at the city wall in just 5 minutes. Ulysses, wearing pajamas, was very conspicuous on the city wall. Fortunately, no one cared about the Lord's slight disgrace at this time, because on the horizon on the other side, a legion of more than 10,000 people was heading towards the Iron City. In the front row were dozens of exquisite iron boxes, somewhat similar to carriages, but without the help of camels. They could gallop freely on the wide plains, and behind them were ferocious cannons. Tens of thousands of musketeers followed the iron boxes, and the queues were very neat. Such a long queue was not chaotic at all, holding a long wooden stick with a sharp knife tied to the top. If Ulysses had seen this thing for the first time, he would have thought it was a short spear, but according to the reports of the spies, this thing called a musket was an extremely powerful long-range witchcraft creation, which contained the power of thunder and fire, and could easily penetrate the armored protection from 100 meters away, causing the cavalry brigade that Grand Duke Rickman was proud of to fail. The only thing that relieved Ulysses was that he did not see the huge alchemical creation flying in the sky. Even so, their chances of victory were slim, because Celtord could never be stronger than the capital. What's more, even the Vatican's punitive army suffered a disastrous defeat, let alone them. Ulysses immediately analyzed it and wondered whether to open the door and surrender. He wanted to, but the Archbishop of Sirtod and the priests were right beside him, and these people received the news faster than he did. "Don't worry too much, Marquis Ulysses." The Archbishop seemed to see Ulysses's fear of fighting and said comfortingly, "I have received the revelation of the Lord. Saint Lucia will personally lead the army to strangle these minions of the evil god who have committed serious crimes in the kingdom. As long as we hold on for some time, victory will be within our grasp. At that time, I will show your achievements to the Pope, and you will be the next king of Hadrada," the Archbishop said firmly. Chapter 403 The Kingdom's people welcome the royal master. Ulysses naturally understood that the so-called king's throne was a poisoned bait, but this bait was too sweet. More importantly, the current situation was still unclear. If he stood on the wrong side, his life would be at stake. Celtod was known as the City of Steel, and the reason for this was naturally the abundant iron ore resources in the surrounding area. In addition, Lord Ulysses was always cautious. The walls of the castle were built very high, and the gates were reinforced with a layer of pure steel. Several strong men had to use a noose to open and close the gates. There were about 7,000 guards in the city, and refugees could be recruited at any time to assist in the defense. Perhaps they only needed to guard for a day or two. 1 or 2 days would be enough. After temporarily stabilizing Lord Ulysses, the archbishop understood that if he did not show his skills, both the nobles and soldiers in the city would easily collapse on the spot under the attack of witchcraft. So he stood on the top of Seltod with dozens of priests. The biggest difference between archbishops and ordinary bishops is that they are the elite of the three-ring clergy, the candidates for cardinals, and can communicate with the gods to a certain extent and get help, so they usually guard the key points, and cooperate with several bishops and dozens of priests to even temporarily compete with a great wizard, great lord of the stars, goddess of the moon, creator of the earth and life. Your humble servant prays here, praying that you will bless this place of faith. The high-pitched prayer sounded on the city wall, and a strong divine light soon emerged from the archbishop's body. The soldiers and nobles illuminated by the light seemed to feel the Lord's gaze, and Ulysses' heart was even more full of blood. He suddenly felt that the tens of thousands of legions under the city were just a group of chickens and dogs. As long as they work together, they will surely achieve the final victory. God is with you and me, the archbishop shouted loudly, and the Bible hanging around his waist floated up and hovered above his head. A more intense light immediately occupied everyone's vision. Ulysses suddenly discovered that this light did not emerge from the Bible, but flew out from the enemy's array. The red stream of light came so fast that before everyone could react, it had already passed through the archbishop's body. The body, strengthened by divine magic, was like paper, and was easily torn to pieces, leaving only blood and flesh residues scattered all over the sky. The high-pitched prayers came to an abrupt end, and the blood in Ulysses' heart immediately cooled down. Several small nobles on the side were so scared that they wet their pants and shouted at the top of their lungs, "Open the door and surrender, surrender!" But it was obviously too late now. Several more streams of light flashed by, and the so-called indestructible steel gate was blasted open by several electromagnetic cannons. Yes, these gunners are getting more and more accurate. At this moment, outside the city, Lin En stared at the chaotic scene on the top of the city and said with satisfaction, "It is still commendable to accurately hit someone at a distance of 1.5 kilometers. The landing point of this electromagnetic cannon is much easier to calculate than that of artillery," Raphael said with a smile, and that bishop dared to stand on the top of the city and chant prayers. They were not blind. It would be a pity not to shoot at such a good target. Lin En also laughed. While he was talking, the solid steel gate in front was blown open by the sound of artillery fire. With absolute technological advantages, even the most difficult siege battles became extremely easy. There was no need to consider the so-called tactics. This kind of crushing pleasure was exactly what he had been looking forward to. The armored vehicles rushed to the front row, and the roar of machine guns quickly disintegrated the guards who tried to resist. The musketeers in the back row only had to take prisoners. In fact, there were very few people who had the courage to resist. The moment most of the guards saw the steel gate being directly smashed, they laid down their weapons. The battle started and ended so quickly that many people in the Iron City did not understand the situation at all, and saw the armored vehicles with machine guns rushing into the city. The houses on the streets were locked, and the civilians stranded on the streets fled in panic. Soon, a stampede occurred. Those who did not have time to escape knelt and curled up, their faces full of panic and fear. Looking at this scene, Lin En thought of the people's panic and even spontaneous resistance during the recovery of lost territory, and couldn't help sighing. It can only be said that the influence of the church's propaganda and brainwashing for hundreds of years is deeply rooted. Wizards are almost equal to evil in the empire. Send some people to rescue the wounded. Lin En looked at Redel and suggested, "But be careful of those fanatics hiding in the crowd to launch suicide attacks." Redel nodded, and immediately led a team of musketeers and several wizards proficient in herbal medicine to rescue people. Not long after the convoy entered the city, they were blocked. Thousands of city guards knelt down in an open space not far from the city gate. The scene was very spectacular. Ulysses and his group of nobles in the front row were covered in blood, holding heavy heads in their hands. These were the heads of the church priests. Taking advantage of the moment when the archbishop was killed and the priests who guided the spell were backfired, Ulysses chose to turn against them without hesitation and led his guards to start a massacre. This was their pledge of allegiance. As a noble, observing words and expressions is naturally the most basic ability. Ulysses saw who was the one in charge at a glance. He was like seeing his long-lost father. He ignored the obstruction of the musketeers and threw himself in front of Lin En, crying and saying that he was held hostage by the bishop of the church, so he did not obey the call of the new kingdom. In fact, he had been secretly accumulating strength these days, waiting day and night for the moment when the king's army returned. "Is that so, Sir Hansen?" Lin En shouted behind him with interest. Under the protection of the guards, several border lords walked up to him with humble expressions and spoke quickly. "Master Wizard, Ulysses is trying to lie to you. He is a lackey of the church and a believer of a false god. He was the first one to propose sending the information of the capital back to the empire. There is a letter to prove it." At this point, Count Hansen couldn't help but look at Ulysses. "You didn't expect that we had already reported you first." Ulysses was so angry that he understood why he got the news only when the army of tens of thousands of people was under his nose. It turned out that these border lords didn't resist at all and surrendered directly. He was obviously the one who surrendered. Chapter 404. This is the only thing that can fight against faith. Ulysses, who was speechless, was soon tied up by a group of wolf-like musketeers. As a blood knight, Ulysses had full confidence that he could kill the untouchables who arrested him at such a close distance, but he was pointed at by a black gun and faced two unfathomable wizards. In the end, he knew the situation and did not resist. After the Lord of the Iron City surrendered, Lin En occupied this important city without spending too much effort. Seltod is the largest iron ore producer in the entire kingdom, and it is also one of the two places that must be taken in this counterattack. Steel is the foundation of industry, and its importance is self-evident. It is used almost everywhere. Although many new steel workshops have been built in the capital, the output is still far from enough, which is why they have developed many new weapons but have not been equipped on a large scale. In fact, the power of magic has played a great role in the manufacture of armored vehicles and battleships. Otherwise they can't even make qualified steel. But there are only so many official wizards. It is a waste to use such high-level talents for such a small matter as steelmaking. So after they defeat the church this time, they have to establish the entire industrial chain as soon as possible. The Legion, which had been attacking for several days and nights, temporarily rested in the city of Seltod and started the drama of fighting the landlords and dividing the land again. The musketeers who came from the poor were more excited than each other. They rushed into the luxurious manors of the nobles, knocked down the guards, and began to count the finances. Lin En has always been very strict about discipline. Once someone is found to have hidden finances or to have killed the poor at will, he will definitely be dismissed or even severely punished. To develop good military discipline, it often takes day-to-day training, and sometimes it only takes 1 or 2 indulgences for the military discipline to collapse. As for the money and the land that was cleared and measured, they were all distributed to the poor who suffered from the oppression of the nobles and the church. Dividing the land, distributing the wealth, criticizing and rescuing the wounded are therefore methods to change the impression of the poor. This tangible benefit is the only thing that can fight against faith. Although most of the poor people have no culture, they are not really stupid. At least everyone with normal IQ should know that once the church returns to rule, everything they have obtained will be taken back. Raphael saw boxes of treasures being distributed, and tens of thousands of gold coins were directly given to the poor. He couldn't help but be amazed and surprised by the generosity of this magic star. Even the wizards of the Aida school had some complaints and couldn't understand someone's behavior of spending money so generously. Only the money that is circulated is called money. Lin En saw the doubts of the crowd and explained, "The value of money itself is artificially given, and it can only be reflected when it is exchanged for goods. No matter how many imperial gold coins you have, you can't buy an airship, let alone a fighter jet, because the empire doesn't have that kind of thing at all. Therefore, the goods produced are the truly valuable things. Money is just a tool for exchange and measuring the value of goods. If you have money but can't buy anything, It is no different from a pauper. These poor people can be transformed into workers, commodity producers, and consumers. If nothing unexpected happens, the gold and silver distributed to the poor will return to their hands by purchasing various novel commodities, and they will distribute the money through wages, forming a positive cycle. In this process, the poor get jobs, the economy develops, and a large number of commodities are produced. Lin En explained some superficial economic theories, but Raphael and others were confused and didn't understand why the economy would improve if they gave money to the poor. You minions of the devil, shameful scum, the great Lord will definitely throw you into hell and burn your souls in the fire of the abyss. The arrested and detained noble children watched their treasures being confiscated and distributed to those lowly poor people, and they roared with their eyes wide open. Since they miss that false god so much, send them to heaven. Lin En waved his hand and asked several elite guards to escort these nobles away. Traitors, shameful scum, shame of the nobility. Before being dragged away, the noble children of Saltord were still cursing wildly, but this time they were directed at Hansen and others. Compared with the wizards who were born evil, these traitors who were also nobles were obviously more hateful. Count Hansen turned a deaf ear to these shouts. He believed that if there was a chance, these noble children who shouted happily would sell themselves out without hesitation in exchange for a chance to survive. It was nothing more than a question of who came first and who came later. Due to the urgency of time, they had to recover the kingdom's territory as much as possible before the Vatican army came. Lin En and others did not intend to stay in this steel city for a long time. They only rested for 3 days, but they did a lot of things. First of all, the nobles in the city, after an investigation, all the most heinous crimes were chopped off, and their bodies were hung on the city gates. Those with minor crimes were sent to mine and build roads. Only a few nobles with good reputations saved their lives and property, but they were stripped of their noble status. As for the local gangs and the like, they were all dealt with and arrested and shot. After this wave of iron-blooded killing methods, coupled with the previous appeasement policy of dividing land and money, they initially controlled the Steel City in just 3 days and won the favor of some people. Another advantage is that now this land is no longer constrained by the nobles, and it can be assured to develop industry in the future. After dealing with these trivial matters, Lin En left 3 wizards and 200 musketeers, and built a 2,000-man security team based on the poor who had been rescued to guard against those fanatics who might cause trouble, and then prepared to continue. Is the 2 speakers going well? Before leaving, Lin En summoned Raphael, who was responsible for the communication, and asked, in the last war, due to the lack of long-distance communication means, they almost overturned. If Aurora had not led the fleet and happened to run into the Empire's expeditionary fleet, it is estimated that when they finished the Kingdom War, their hometown would have been wiped out. Therefore, Lin En learned from his mistakes and used the most basic wireless communication technology. This way, if the several armies heading to retake the kingdom found any unexpected situations, they could contact each other to avoid repeating the same mistakes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 405 The Power of God, the first major defeat. Bad news from the Empire. There are many so-called wireless communication technologies, but generally speaking, they use electromagnetic waves for communication. For wizards who can sense and influence electric and magnetic fields to a certain extent, it is not difficult to use magic to do this. At least it is no problem to simply send a signal. Considering that the electromagnetic waves created by the wizard's current strength have a limited propagation distance after attenuation, Lin En used 100 airships patrolling in various places to build a temporary signal base station covering half of the kingdom. There is a wizard proficient in thunder magic on each airship. After receiving the weak electromagnetic wave signal, they will send it again, and through the relay method, the message will be transmitted to the entire kingdom in a short time. Although Lin En has a simpler communication method, that is, to connect those wizards whose mental power has been cracked through the magic network, This is still a secret for the time being. He has only demonstrated similar abilities in front of Anthony and Redhill. After all, no wizard would like others to be able to easily enter his brain. In the absence of absolute strength suppression, exposing this is tantamount to courting death. According to the signals we have received in the past few days, the other two legions have made very smooth progress in recovering the kingdom's territory and have not encountered any strong obstacles. Speaker Herv has now entered the empire and should be capturing Mist territory. Mist territory is located in the west of the empire and is a border territory bordering the kingdom. Vittorio had previously discovered a lot of useful information from the minds of the captured priests, such as this place is the source of oil. It is also one of the two important territories that must be captured in this counterattack. Everything goes well. Lin En nodded, but still vaguely felt that something was wrong. Now it has been more than 2 months since the end of the war in the capital, and the empire and the church are so quiet. The airships they sent to explore did not find any signs of the army entering the country. This abnormality made Lin En somewhat uneasy. In my opinion, the holy city is probably in chaos now. They will definitely not be able to take care of the kingdom's affairs in a short time, Raphael said optimistically. The punitive army sent by the church has just experienced 2 disastrous defeats. It is not an easy task to regroup. As Raphael was thinking, the electromagnetic wave signal receiving device in his arms suddenly lit up. It seems that Speaker Herv has already conquered Mist territory, Raphael said as he put the receiving device on the table. Lin En also looked over. The research on the magic of electromagnetic wave technology is still in its early stages. Although the wizards who control thunder magic have learned how to send signals, they still need to rely on this special receiving device to detect the subtle electromagnetic fluctuations. The sound of ticking, 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 and ticking continued to resound in the room. Raphael took a Morse code combination and translated it. This first generation of electromagnetic wave receiver is still very simple in function. It will only make 2 ticking sounds after receiving 2 electromagnetic waves of different frequencies. When Lin En took out this thing, Raphael was very disappointed. This is indeed an effective long-distance communication method, but the information that can be conveyed is really limited. It can only use ticks to represent victory and ticks to represent failure, so that they can roughly know the situation of the battle. However, the imagination of this magic star is obviously not comparable to theirs. Through the different arrangements of long and short sounds, almost countless combinations can be derived to send out anything you want to say. It can also prevent the other party from listening to the signal or capturing the person who sent the message, so as to obtain the information. Because the information is encrypted, only those who have the code book can crack it. The only problem is that it is troublesome to translate. Mr. Territory, a great defeat. Raphael read slowly according to the information given in the code book. Has the enemy been defeated? Raphael thought so, but soon found that the text combination of the last wave of signals seemed to be rescue. Lin En immediately stood up from his seat with a solemn look on his face. He did not look at the translation book, but he translated the whole sentence faster than Raphael. We suffered a great defeat in Mr. Territory and need rescue immediately. Raphael only felt his brain confused for a moment. He knew that there was nothing wrong with Lin En's translation as he mastered the code book. But how is this possible? Raphael's face was full of astonishment and confusion. Although the 3 legions that recovered the kingdom's territory had only about 10,000 people, they had an absolute technical advantage. To be on the safe side, the 3 speakers had already set out with the army. However, in order to create the illusion that the speakers were still stranded in the capital to confuse the enemy, they did not appear in public. Now, the capital, which seemed to be heavily guarded, was very empty. Could it be that there happened to be a legendary priest stationed in Mist territory? Raphael was puzzled and finally thought of this possibility. Only the divine descent could defeat the 10,000-man legion equipped with new muskets and armored vehicles, and let Speaker Herv use the word great defeat in the communication. Lin En frowned slightly. He didn't think so, because they had discussed similar situations before. No matter which legion was in this counterattack, once it was confirmed that the enemy had a legendary priest, they would give up their plan to attack, and then defend and wait for help, or even retreat. There is a price to release the god's descent. If you don't fight hard, There should be no reason for the other party to use it rashly. The one-for-one exchange of high-end combat power for the church is not a profit, and the moment he met the legendary clergy, Proof should have sent a signal immediately, instead of waiting until he retreated to ask for help. Lin En judged that the situation must have been reversed in an instant for such a situation to occur. The most important thing is that the message sent did not mention the word God's descent at all. There is also a second possibility, that is, the Empire's punitive army suddenly appeared in mist territory, and it is even possible to launch a surprise attack. Aurora's figure emerged from the side and said the most likely situation. In other words, the Empire's army concealed the detection of the airship and arrived under their noses without their knowledge. This is not impossible. Perhaps the airship they sent out for reconnaissance was quietly removed by some powerful divine art, or some kind of ultra-large-scale invisibility magic, which can make an entire army disappear from sight and march behind them openly. Chapter 406, Race Against Time, Corrupt Battlefield. Raphael's forehead was covered with cold sweat. Either of these two guesses was bad news. I'll go there right now. After Aurora and Lin En figured out the general situation together, they didn't delay any longer and disappeared from the spot quickly. Raphael's face did not relax at all. After all, this place was far away from mist territory. Even the straight-line distance was more than 150 kilometers. Even with the speed of the legendary speaker, it would take 2 hours to fly there. I'm afraid it would be too late. Lin En gently stroked the secret ring in his hand, and let the intelligent brain start to locate the coordinates, preparing to project power and will to mist territory through the magic network link. He wanted to go and see what happened and prove in person. Lin En had taken some emergency measures before, such as arranging a wizard from Yaita and the other 2 legions. They carried special secret rings and the degree of mental power cracking reached more than 30%. This kind of deep coordinate that touches the soul can easily locate over hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. With the help of the intelligent brain and the secret ring as a carrier, it can achieve long-distance power projection. Strictly speaking, this belongs to the category of psychic magic, which is much more advanced than electromagnetic wave communication, but it is a taboo in the wizard's land. Lin En has only seen 3 people with similar abilities so far. The first one is Hiran Ram. With the help of a large number of psychic notes left by the evil wizard Merc, he created an imperfect magic net with his own intelligence and wisdom, and also created such a crazy thing as the soul-eating magic circle. He completely regarded the wizards whose computing power was cracked in the faceless gathering as the food for resurrecting his daughter. He is now taking this path, but the means are more gentle, adhering to the strategy of sustainable development and mutual benefit and win-win. He provides knowledge and the wizards provide computing power. It can be said that everyone is happy, and he will never kill the chicken to get the eggs or exhaust the pond to catch fish. The second one is Aurora. The other party once left a magic mark on his forehead, which was used as the coordinates for projection, so that the power could be maintained. However, this kind of magic is obviously only used for emergency situations. It has higher requirements for the caster and is not likely to be popularized. The third one is naturally the false god, Ella. The other party can not only grant divine arts to priests and bishops, but at the level of cardinals, it can even be used as a coordinate for carrying divine power projection. The legendary clergy are even more amazing. They can open the gate of heaven and send Ella's body over. Lin En has always suspected that the ability of the Holy See to grant divine arts and the divine descent technique have some similarities with his magic network, but now there is a lack of evidence and it has not been confirmed. The coordinates of number 043 have been located. According to this, the straight line distance is 159 kilometers. Do you want to start the magic projection? The prompt sound of the intelligent brain sounded in his mind, which drew Lin En's attention back, and then he recited it silently without hesitation. Yes. At the same time, at the border of the Sekka's empire, in the territory of Mist, a fierce battle was taking place, and the sound of fighting continued. Kill these minions of the devil, for the glory of the Lord. The knights in silver armor rushed forward, their eyes full of fanaticism and murderousness, and stabbed out with the long spears in their hands, killing all the musketeers who were still loading. However, Their offensive soon encountered obstacles. Groups of fireballs rushed in, and the flames and smoke caused the approaching cavalry brigade to stagnate. Then several armored vehicles were blocked in front. The roar of machine guns rang in everyone's ears, and the flames leaping from the muzzle were like a sickle of a god of death. Wherever they swept, a burst of blood and flesh flew. Whether it was the divine shields on their bodies or the solid iron armor, they would be torn apart in an instant. Under such a blow, a large group of cavalry quickly dispersed, and the earth was shaking violently. An extremely tall giant soon appeared in front of the wizards. He was over 7 meters tall, covered in armor, holding a huge iron shield in his hand. He was strafed by machine guns and threw an armored vehicle to the ground. The next moment, he was pierced by several red streams of light coming from a distance. The electromagnetic cannon undoubtedly made a contribution again. The giant's body, as strong as a hill, fell to the ground with a bang, crushing the two teams fighting below. Bright red blood spurted out and dyed the surrounding soil red. In this extremely chaotic battlefield, the transition between life and death was almost in an instant. However, there was not only one such tall giant. Soon, there were many of them everywhere on the battlefield. They were not only thick-skinned and had strong physical and magical resistance, but also had very sophisticated equipment. Whether it was a musket or a low-level magic, it could only cause some skin injuries on them. Even after the electromagnetic cannon penetrated the special iron shields and armors that were tens of centimeters thick, it was not enough to cause fatal damage, unless it was concentrated fire or hit the vital points. Prv used force field magic to tear apart two tall iron armor giants, but he still couldn't make up for the festering situation, because the timing of the appearance of these imperial legions was too coincidental. Just when they were attacking the city, the other side appeared behind them without warning and launched a surprise attack. Neither the airship nor the wizards who were responsible for perception noticed it at all, until the imperial legions approached and the surface began to shake. They realized that something was wrong. However, it was obviously too late. The rear artillery position collapsed directly under the impact of thousands of divine punishment cavalry, and the wizards stationed at the position could not stop this group of knights who were blessed with divine arts and were ferocious beasts per capita, not to mention the priests and bishops of the church, who were mixed in with the silver-armored knights, and the divine arts that popped up from time to time gave them a headache. For the musketeers, the most important thing is the formation. Once the formation collapses, they will not be able to form dense firepower and their combat effectiveness will be greatly reduced, not to mention that this time they are fighting against a large number of God's punishment knights in the plains. According to the tactics they had previously envisioned, when encountering a large number of troops in the plains, they must rely on the blocking of armored vehicles, the assistance of machine guns and artillery fire, and the bombing of airships, ground-to-air integration, to block the enemy 50 meters in front of them, and resolutely not give the enemy a chance to approach. Now this plan has obviously failed. After their formation was disrupted and they were forced to engage in direct combat, how to preserve as much manpower as possible to retreat has become the only thing they can do. P.S. Chapter 2 around 2 p.m. Chapter 407 Lin En, the one who really casts magic is not me, but the sun. Mr. Speaker, we can't wait any longer. Let's stay behind to cover the retreat. Seeing that the array that had been assembled with great difficulty was defeated again, Sanchez spoke anxiously. In the current situation, they may not be able to wait for support. The best solution is to leave some elites to cover the retreat, otherwise all of them will die here. No, I'm afraid you alone are not enough to stop them, Prv said with a serious look. The imperial army that suddenly appeared behind them is as many as 50,000 to 60,000 people. There must be legendary clergy among them, or perhaps more than one. He did not squander magic power recklessly just to guard against the other party. With the power of Sanchez and others, I'm afraid it is not enough to stop the other party at all. Now the only one who can cover the retreat is himself. Prv was about to speak when a voice suddenly rang in everyone's ears. You retreat first, I'll stop them. Prv and the others immediately turned their heads and looked over. An unexpected figure appeared in front of them. According to the intelligence, Lin En, who should be in the Steel City, actually appeared here. Master Lin En, Sanchez was quite surprised and said quickly, "Great, you came really fast. Where are Speaker Aurora and Lord Vittorio? Have they arrived?" "If the support arrives, the speakers will unite and they can fight a fierce counterattack." Prv saw at a glance that Lin En was not here in person. It should be a projection magic similar to Aurora. As he expected, Lin En quickly explained, "No, the support has not arrived yet. It will take at least 2 to 3 hours for the 2 speakers to get here. If they need to wait for the support of the other 2 legions, it will be even later." Although they have airships to transport troops, large-scale military mobilization is not an easy task. "How much power can you exert in your current state?" Prv couldn't help but interrupt. He recognized Lin's strength, but after all, he was only a 4th-ring wizard. If he were to come in person and use the forbidden technique that temporarily increased his strength when fighting against Ella, he might be able to do this, but now there was only a magic incarnation. Could it be that he brought the raw materials for performing nuclear explosion magic? Thinking of this possibility, Prv raised a little expectation, but it was broken the next moment. In fact, this incarnation can only release a 4th-ring magic once at full power, that's all. Lin said truthfully, and then before several people questioned, he said decisively, "But I think it should be enough." Seeing that the magic star was so confident, Prv didn't rush to refute even though he had a lot of questions, but asked Lin directly what his plan was. "Anyway, I need some of your help. Separate the enemy and us to avoid accidental injuries," Lin En said very quickly, then looked at the chaotic battlefield and sighed. "It seems that we can only give up some people." Under the orderly command, the scattered wizards quickly gathered together and organized the largest-scale counterattack. Everyone no longer reserved their magic power. Prv took the lead and sent a huge amount of magic power deep into the ground. The next moment, the entire battlefield began to crack rapidly. The earth was torn open, and large pieces of soil and rocks continued to crack, forming a deep gully. Not only that, the cracks were also spreading rapidly to both sides. Looking from above, you can see that the entire battlefield was torn into 2 halves by the collapsed earth, changing the terrain and topography with one's own strength and dominating the situation of the entire battlefield. This is the power of legendary magic. The whole process was completed in just over 10 seconds. Prv was panting slightly, and the magic power in his body had been consumed by nearly half. It was not an easy task for him to cast such a large-scale legendary spell. Then Sanchez and others also cast spells one after another. Various spells followed one after another. The power of frost, fire and thunder intertwined and smashed into the enemy array with great momentum. By the will of the Lord, evil will eventually be dispelled. At the same time, a huge and sacred voice resounded on the battlefield, and an invisible curtain appeared in the air, blocking the magic rain. Although it was soon blown up by hundreds of magic, it also greatly reduced casualties. Prv understood that it was the legendary clergy of the church who took action, but their goal had been achieved, and the entire battlefield was temporarily divided. The charging cavalry slowed down their pace, and several giants with less clever brains fell directly into it, and they fell so hard that they saw stars and couldn't climb out for a long time. Use magic to bombard again, and then retreat. Next, it depends on Master Lin En. Prv sighed and said that he had done everything he could. Sanchez hesitated to speak. He felt that it was a bit risky to pin all his hopes on Lin's incarnation, but he finally obeyed the order because there was no better way now. At this moment, Lin, who used polarized magic to cover his body, was suspended in the sky. Magic power surged like a wave, spreading within a few hundred meters around him. If it were a normal day, such obvious magic fluctuations would inevitably arouse the opponent's vigilance. But Lin was not too worried, because now the battlefield was full of traces of magic. He deliberately asked Prv and others to cast spells to counterattack, not only to divide the battlefield, but also to provide cover. The weather is really good today. Lin looked up at the sky, and a red sun was blazing. August is the hottest time in the Empire, and the midday sun can add a lot of color to his next magic. It seems that the battle is about to end. In the array of the Holy See, Joshua looked at the flying magic rain and spoke slowly. Although the opponent's counterattack was fierce, Joshua thought it was just a desperate struggle. After consuming their magic power, these people would completely lose the ability to fight against them. As for the large rift that divided the battlefield, he didn't even need to make a move. Several cardinals worked together and used magic to create wide and passable high bridges. Saint Lucia beside him was also watching this scene, but her and others cast magic at such a cost that she vaguely sensed something was wrong. Then she raised her head, looked at the scorching sun in the sky, and murmured, "Did you notice? The sunlight seems to have dimmed." Chapter 408. Everything returns to nothingness. Sunshine. It's getting darker. Joshua frowned and looked up at the sky. He did sense a trace of uneasiness. "It's magic," Lucia said casually. Under her perception, there was a strong fluctuation of magic in the sky above the battlefield hundreds of meters away from them. And it was spreading over here. She didn't notice it before because the frequent spellcasting of those wizards did cause the concentration of magic in a certain area to increase greatly. So Lucia didn't notice it until the concentration of magic exceeded the threshold. But it's too late to react now. Lin En's magic has been released. The sky is getting darker. This time, it was not only Lucia who felt it. The soldiers charging on the battlefield felt it clearly, because the area of several kilometers in radius turned directly from day to evening. Such a strange scene made the most determined believers hesitate. When everyone looked up, they were shocked to find that a huge transparent mirror appeared above their heads. It looked like a translucent upside-down pot, blocking the scorching sun at noon. Lin En raised his palm, and the brightness of the entire battlefield was reduced by several degrees again. After the scorching sunlight from the sky passed through the huge condenser, it was immediately deflected and focused together. Everything returns to nothing. The sun shines. This ancient line popped up in Lin En's mind, and all the magic power sent over this time disappeared by 90%, and even the power of the magic net was used to a certain extent. The next moment, an inverted cone-shaped light column with a diameter of 100 meters and a height of almost infinite fell from the sky. The sunlight covering the entire battlefield was compressed into an area of 100 meters. The bright light was so strong that it made everyone present unable to open their eyes. Then a shrill scream and wailing sounded throughout the battlefield. The Imperial soldiers within the range of the light column evaporated directly on the spot under the high temperature comparable to the surface of a star. The Divine Punishment Knights, who were protected by divine magic, lived longer, but it was just torture. Their horses neighed and fell to the ground. The armor on their bodies was melted into molten iron, sizzling under the scorching high temperature, and the shirt inside was burned. Under the sweep of the light beam, the grass and trees withered and collapsed, the ground dried and cracked, and thousands of imperial legions were instantly ignited into balls of fire. Under the high temperature that exceeded the surface of the stars, all beings were equal. Even the giants with high magic resistance had no power to resist and were directly roasted into a charred corpse. "It's a legendary magic." Joshua's pupils shrank. The speed of light was too fast and too urgent. The light beam was focused and swept out in just 1 second. More than 2,000 Imperial soldiers died in front of their eyes. "In the name of the Lord, arrows of judgment." Joshua raised the scepter in his hand and roared loudly. Hundreds of arrows flashing with divine magic appeared in the void, pointing directly at the upside-down focusing mirror above his head. These arrows were all given special magic-breaking power, and the mirror covering the entire battlefield had no possibility of moving or dodging. The dense rain of arrows flew out, dazzling like a meteor, and soon collided with the huge focusing mirror. The mirror was much more fragile than Joshua expected. There was no obstruction at all, and it exploded in an instant. Countless fragments flew everywhere and fell to the ground. "It seems to be just a flower stand." Joshua breathed a sigh of relief. This was much easier to deal with than he thought. "It's not that simple." Lucia shook her head. She didn't rush to take action, but tried her best to sense the position of the caster. This body has great restrictions on her. Even though it has been raised for 7 or 8 years, the power that can be exerted is still extremely limited due to the low degree of fit. Sure enough, the next second after Lucia opened her mouth, dozens of large shattered concentrators did not fall, but floated in the air, changing their forms and turning into smaller concentrators. With Lin En's current computing power, it is simply a fantasy to reorganize the spells in such a short time, but it is different with the power of the magic network and the intelligent brain. The spell model can be completed by the intelligent brain mobilizing the computing power of the other wizards in the magic network, and the whole process is compressed to within 1 second. The Imperial Expeditionary Army, which has not yet recovered from the terrifying scene of the 100-meter light column, soon ushered in the baptism of laser beams. In an instant, dozens of secondary laser beams spread across the entire battlefield. Although their power was much reduced compared to the previous sunshine, the range of attack has expanded by more than 10 times. Several Imperial soldiers who were lucky enough to avoid the beam of light were swept by the sudden laser beam. Before they could react, their bodies were cut in half from top to bottom. Similar scenes were staged everywhere on the battlefield. Joshua's face suddenly became extremely ugly. Found it. Lucia looked at a certain direction in the distant sky, stretched out her right hand, and clenched it suddenly. Lin En, who was hiding in the sky with polarized magic and controlling the focusing magic, began to twist and deform his whole body. If he had a physical body, he would have been crushed by now. Even so, the ring of mystic magic, as the core had begun to crack, and the explosion was only a moment away. Good perception ability. Lin En was quite surprised. You know, he is now a group of magic projection, which can be well hidden in the land with rich magic. He thought that the other party would need at least some effort to find him, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. Before the mystic magic ring, which he relied on, completely exploded, Lin En used his last strength to control a huge refractor and cut the gathered light to the place where the divine magic fluctuations were the strongest. That was the direction where Lucia was. The saint of the church had raised her hand before the beam fell. A smooth mirror appeared in front of her. The powerful laser beam was directly reflected back and penetrated Lin's body at an unimaginable speed, directly shattering the secret ring at the core. It seems that this is the end. Lin thought so, but he also saw the woman who bounced the laser back. She looked about 23 or 24 years old, wearing a crown and a white holy robe, and her green eyes were shining like stars. Combining the information collected before, Lin immediately guessed the other party's identity. After losing its support, the body made of magic power quickly disintegrated. P.S. The second chapter is still around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Probably a little slower this week. Chapter 409. A single person blocks the expeditionary army. This will surely be a battle that will go down in history. As the caster disappeared, the laser beams that kept shooting down from the sky also stopped. At this moment, the battlefield was in a mess, with countless rubble and soil lying around, and pieces of scorched earth spread all over the ground. Tens of thousands of soldiers were burned by the light, and black smoke was coming out of their bodies. Some had fainted, and some were still barely holding on, and they had all lost their combat effectiveness. The Imperial Legion, which had originally prepared for a surprise attack and defeated the entire musketeer team, suffered heavy casualties in an instant. Some soldiers with weak faith even developed a fear and panic of the sun, and screamed in fear when the warm sun shone on them. A wave of floating hymns soon resounded on the tragic battlefield. Under the scorching sun, green rain fell from the sky. After the wounded who were wailing in pain came into contact with drops of rain and dew, the ferocious expressions on their faces gradually became peaceful, and the whole person fell asleep directly, and the burns on his body were slowly subsiding. This is the legendary magic, the Rain of Grace. Lucia cast it herself, and the range was enough to cover the entire battlefield. The surviving Imperial soldiers, whether they were burned or had their limbs broken, were recovering quickly. The bodies of the dead also showed fluorescence. The second function of the Rain of Grace was to collect the souls of the departed into the kingdom of God. May their souls be protected forever and enjoy eternal joy in the kingdom of God. Several bishops sang hymns loudly. Lucia, who cast divine magic, counted the casualties within a minute. About 4,000 people died under a magic attack, and tens of thousands were injured. The only good news was that most of the casualties were ordinary soldiers, and the divine punishment knights were wearing reflective silver armor and had multiple protections, which could resist the power of lasers to a large extent. However, under the previous sunshine, more than 1,000 people were killed and injured. Your Highness Lucia, do we need to continue the pursuit? Joshua asked, looking at the messy battlefield in front of him. "Let's arrange the wounded first." Lucia shook her head. Although she cured the injuries of these people, the morale of the Imperial army had been severely damaged. And in just a short while, the scattered musketeers had calmed down and evacuated out of sight in an orderly manner. Continuing the pursuit obviously would not achieve any good results. "Do you have any information about this wizard?" Lucy suddenly stretched out her hand, and a water curtain suddenly appeared in front of her. In the water curtain was a young brown-haired wizard. "If I'm not mistaken, he should be called Lin En, a great wizard. He is called the Magic Star by those evil god-believers. It is rumored that the new and strange things that emerged in the wizard land seem to be related to him," Joshua said solemnly. After Edwell led the expeditionary army to defeat the kingdom, they increased their attention to intelligence. Although most of the spies sent out were found out by the other party, they also obtained a lot of useful information. It is rumored that all the changes in the wizard land, including muskets, cannons, airships and the iron boxes that can run, are the work of this magic star. The amount of the reward for the other party's head within the church has exceeded 1 million. Lucia secretly memorized the name, and then a musket flew over from a distance and landed in her hand. She was still very interested in the new weapons displayed by these wizards, but the sunshine that Lin En had just fired was obviously very targeted, melting all the armored vehicles and artillery in the positions left on the battlefield into a pool of molten iron. Their only gain was this thing called a musket. At the same time, taking advantage of the chaos of the Imperial Legion, Rev, who had fled all the way to several kilometers away, saw that the other party had no intention of chasing him, and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed that they were temporarily safe. "Is this the foreign magic that Master Lin En said?" Sanchez's expression was a little weird. Although he had been running away before, he had also paid attention to the battle behind him. In fact, as long as he was not blind, anyone could see the huge light column with a diameter of 100 meters. The power could only be described as terrifying. Even the legendary magic was no more than this. Now they didn't know the result of the battle. It seemed that the other party's casualties must be large, and the church would not be able to take care of them in a short time. This is indeed within the scope of the fourth ring magic. Rev shook his head. He was also surprised by the power of the spell, but he saw that it was not Lin's own power, but the principle of light refraction and focusing. The mirror magic was like a lever, prying the power of the star above their heads. In other words, it was not Lin who released this legendary magic, but the sun above their heads. "It is summer now, so magic is so powerful." After Rev's explanation, Sanchez finally understood, but he still admired Lin's imagination and creativity for the spell. Lin, who was praised by everyone, had returned to his body. It was not easy to control an incarnation to complete such a huge spell hundreds of kilometers away. The loss of mental power was so serious that his brain felt swollen. "Lin, are you okay?" Raphael asked anxiously. They were just talking about whether to send an airship to rush to the rescue. But Lin En suddenly raised his hand to stop him from talking, and then he closed his eyes and sat still. "Fortunately, I'm fine." Lin En rubbed his temples, looked at Raphael and others, and announced a good news. "Speaker Rev and the others should be safe now." Hearing this, the wizards present were relieved, and Pierce asked curiously, "So you were trying to contact Speaker Rev just now?" "No, I went there myself." Lin En didn't hide anything, and directly told everything he saw and heard. "In other words, you, the Dean, forced back tens of thousands of the Vatican's crusade army by yourself?" Alok's face was full of admiration and disbelief. "You know, Speaker Rev, who led tens of thousands of musketeers, was beaten and could only flee, but the Dean was able to severely injure him with magic. This is incredible. It can't be considered a retreat. At best it was a slight block for a while." Lin En shook his head and said truthfully. However, in the eyes of Raphael and others, even this was already very exaggerated. With just one incarnation, they were able to block the progress of tens of thousands of expeditionary forces and at least one legendary priest. This would surely be a battle worthy of being recorded in history. Chapter 410. Thanks to you. Otherwise we would probably all die on the battlefield. It's a pity. If it weren't for the obstruction of the Holy Lady of the Church, You alone could have wiped out the entire Imperial Expeditionary Army, Raphael said with regret. A lock on the side asked curiously, Master Dean, why haven't I seen you use such a powerful magic before? Sunshine has strict requirements on the weather, and the effect is only good enough when it is used for the first time, Lin En explained. If it weren't for the emergency this time, he wanted to use it in a more critical place. After all, although this magic is powerful, it takes a long time to prepare and has many disadvantages. For example, the weather must be clear, and the light can be refracted, emitted, and absorbed. The other party is not stupid. After suffering a loss once, he will definitely be on guard. This time, the laser he fired was bounced back. Obviously, the church has learned enough lessons and has found a way to deal with laser magic. Of course, Lin En doesn't think that the other party has the ability to create a mirror that reflects light 100%. As long as the intensity of the laser is high enough, even a reflector will be cut instantly. Go and inform Redel and the others to set off immediately and head to Mist territory. Lin En stood up and said solemnly, although he temporarily repelled the attack of the Holy See, he did not rule out the possibility of the other party's pursuit, and he had to rush to reinforce immediately. Raphael and others nodded in unison. In fact, they were also preparing to leave this Steel City today, and all the supplies had been prepared in advance. Due to the need to establish a communication base station and daily patrols, nearly 40% of the airships were withdrawn to perform tasks. Their legion was only allocated 40 ships, which was not enough to transport tens of thousands of people. After a brief discussion, Lin En quickly made a decision. He and Raphael took the airship and led a part of the people to the destination first. Later, Redel and the two great wizards led the rest of the legion to come slowly. The Steel City of Wilsel is about 159 kilometers away from the Imperial border territory in a straight line. Normal marching plus bypassing mountains and crossing rivers takes at least several days, but taking an airship only takes more than an hour. Along the way, intelligence from all over the kingdom was continuously transmitted to the receiving device through electromagnetic communication technology, and then translated. Raphael couldn't help but sigh at the convenience of this thing. Information sent from any location can be spread throughout the kingdom within a few minutes. All the news can be summed up to say two things. First, the airships they deployed to patrol the border between the kingdom and the empire are still good, which means that the punitive army of the Holy See sneaked into their protective circle and failed to remove these nails. This made Lin En a little relieved. In order to build this defense line throughout the kingdom and avoid being attacked by others, he has put in a lot of effort. The patrol track and position of each airship are carefully designed to ensure that they form a horn, and they need to communicate with each other every once in a while. Unless the other party can wipe out all the airships in a large area in an instant, there will be news. The second is that Herth has led his men to retreat to an imperial town that was captured before, and they are holding on for help. When the airship landed in the town, a group of wizards were busy reinforcing the city walls. When they saw Lin En, they bowed respectfully. Master Lin En, this time it's really thanks to you. Otherwise we would probably all die on the battlefield. Sanchez walked up, patted Lin En on the shoulder, and said gratefully, if Lin En hadn't arrived in time before, he would have been prepared to stay behind to cover the retreat, which was obviously a decision of no return. Don't be so polite. Facing the blockade of the Empire and the Church, everyone must go all out. Lin En shook his head. They were already at a disadvantage at the high end, and losing any legion would be an unacceptable loss. Then Lin En asked about the casualties of this war. It's much more serious than expected, Sanchez said with a wry smile. A full 1,200 people were killed and more than 3,700 were injured. That is to say, more than half of the 10,000-man musketeer team were killed or wounded, and not only that, they also lost a large number of artillery and firearms. I think these weapons should have been seized, Sanchez said solemnly. This was his biggest concern. In the wars since they left the land of wizards, they had won even the most tragic battle to defend the capital, so they didn't need to be on guard against this before. But now it's different. With so many weapons seized by the enemy, the enemy is likely to copy them. It doesn't matter. I have melted the artillery and armored vehicles. As for the production method of basic weapons such as muskets, it is impossible to hide it. It is only a matter of time before the enemy cracks it. We just need to ensure that we are much faster than the enemy in the upgrading of weapons. Lin En was very open-minded. He knew very well that as long as the elites of the empire and the church were willing to think seriously about simple weapons such as flintlock muskets and airships, they could always be made after spending some time. The reason why there is no movement now is simply because the time is too short, and the bishops of the church are focusing on feudal superstition and believe that this is a demonic creation. Of course, without the blueprint, they could not make an advanced device like the internal combustion engine, which is a bit technical. As he spoke, Sanchez led everyone into a manor. This was the residence of a small earl in the empire. When they brought people from the kingdom to kill them, the other party simply packed up his belongings and ran away, leaving no guards. They took over the entire city without any effort. But now this manor has become a temporary command post and a place for the wounded. Many tents have been set up in the open area. Herbalists are busy preparing potions, and waves of painful wails can be heard faintly. I really don't know when the war will end. Johnny, who followed behind the two, looked at the tents and sighed. Probably when the day when the church is completely defeated. Allah continued with anticipation. We will pull the gods down from the sky, build wizards' towers in every place on this continent, spread knowledge, eliminate ignorance, and spread the glory of magic to the whole land. This is exactly the war propaganda slogan often used by the parliament. It must be said that it is very inspiring for many young wizards with ambitions and passion. There will always be such a day, Allah said confidently. Lin En also nodded and said with a smile, maybe soon, if this battle goes well. P.S. Chapter 2 is still a little later, around 2:30 in the afternoon. Chapter 411, Opportunity to Defeat the Holy See. Sanchez led Lin En and the others to the conference room, where hundreds of wizards were gathered, arguing and talking about the recent defeat. Aurora, who had set out first, had already arrived, and even Vittorio had arrived here, apparently rushing over the moment he received the news. After Lin En and the others sat down, Rev suppressed the arguments in the conference room and spoke solemnly. This defeat was indeed my negligence. The timing of the Vatican's punitive attack was indeed very accurate, and the magic that allowed the entire legion to approach quietly and invisibly was also very special. But if they were vigilant enough, they would not have noticed something was wrong until someone approached them. It seems that the long-term victory has made us all a little slack. Vittorio shook his head. However, Rev was actually cautious enough. He sent most of the airships to explore the surroundings before the war. I'm afraid no one would have thought that a legion of tens of thousands of people could sneak in quietly. If it were me, I'm afraid I would have been caught in the trap. How did they do it? Aurora was quite interested in this. With her mastery of polarization magic, she could make a musketeer team of hundreds or even thousands of people disappear from sight and march secretly, but that was a legion of tens of thousands of people. Invisibility alone was not enough. Every step of those giants, who were 7 or 8 meters tall, would probably shake the mountains and the earth. There was no way to hide. Could it be the realm of the kingdom of God? Lin En suddenly reminded. When he fought with Edwell in the capital, he noticed that this thing was very strange, and the inside and outside were like two completely different spaces. It's possible. Vittorio nodded. If this was the case, it was not good news. The other party could expand the realm of the kingdom of God so much, and its strength was undoubtedly much stronger than they expected. Master Lin En, you stayed behind alone just now to cover the rear. You should have already tested the other party's details, right? Rev straightened his face and asked. The range and power of the sunshine that Lin En cast shocked even him. The one who could break this magic and defeat the magic projection in a short time must be a legendary clergyman. The other two speakers also looked over, especially Aurora. She was the most shocked when she heard Rev talk about Lin En blocking the Vatican's expeditionary army alone. She flew all the way to rescue him in a hurry, but Lin En's incarnation solved the problem. Lin En pondered for a while, and swept his right hand across the table. A layer of water curtain suddenly emerged, reflecting two figures, a man and a woman. The man was about 50 years old, wearing a golden robe, slender and solemn. "This is Joshua, the chief judge of the Vatican. He should be the one who fought with me on the misty sea before." Aurora pointed out the identity of one of them. All the wizards present nodded. This judge was one of the 5 legendary clergymen in the church. It was not difficult to confirm. As for the other one, Saint Lucia, I didn't expect that she also possessed legendary power, Proof said very unexpectedly. They have collected portraits and information of all key figures above the cardinal in the church, and the saints of the church are no exception. However, according to their intelligence, the position of the saint is rotated every few years and is held by nuns in their teens. The only thing they have in common is that they look good and cold and beautiful. No matter how you look at it, it seems that they are put on the surface to fool the poor. It is a bit too exaggerated that such a person can also perform legendary magic. You have to know that they have spent half their lives to achieve this by trickery, and they have not yet truly set foot in the realm of legend. The gap is so big that it is despairing. I don't think it's that easy, otherwise the legends of the church would have been flooded long ago. Vittorio interrupted. The candidates for the saints changed frequently. Maybe they could not bear such a strong force, so they were forced to rotate. The saints of the previous generations disappeared. According to the church, they were sent to serve the gods. Most likely they have died, but they only sent 2 legends. This is really... Vittorio's expression was strange. It was hard to tell whether he was happy or sad. Maybe there are still other troops that haven't arrived yet. In any case, this is good news. Proof's face eased a little. This means that they have a certain advantage in high-end power for the time being. It is best to take the initiative and defeat the opponent before the support arrives. According to Ruv's guess, the false god is the source of power for these divine magicians. As long as this source is solved, the empire and the church will collapse. The key to this battle is how to force them to open the gate of heaven at the right time. The place of the decisive battle should be as open as possible to avoid accidental injuries. Proof added, "It would be great if we could lure out that saint or the chief judge." The wizards present immediately discussed these 2 points. They needed a complete plan and a plan for dealing with unexpected events. Raphael even suggested that they could learn from Edwell and dig a tunnel to sneak into the oil city. They would make a feint attack from the outside, while the speakers and Lin, the magic star, would carry out the decapitation operation. In this way, even if the magic got out of control in the end, the casualties would only be the imperial legions and the people in the city, and would not affect their own people. Prevent his men, who had seen the power of a nuclear explosion, looked at each other and shook their heads. Raphael obviously underestimated the new magic developed by Lin. Once that thing got out of control, let alone standing outside the city, even if they were several kilometers away, they would be torn to pieces by the shock wave. However, Raphael's proposal was still very constructive and could be used as one of the alternative plans. "Master Lin, what do you think?" Vittorio thought this plan was not bad, as long as it could be guaranteed to be foolproof and not affect the outside world. Lin pondered for a long time, and did not give a direct answer, but suddenly asked, "Chairman Vittorio, how far is this place from the oil production area?" "If the information I got is correct, the straight-line distance is about 10 kilometers, Vittorio replied. "Show me the map." Lin stood up, took the parchment scroll handed over by a wizard, and carefully examined the topography of Mist territory. He soon had an idea in his mind. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 412, Their hearts have been corrupted by money. Bang, bang, bang. In the city of Kerosene, in the Mist territory, thunderous explosions echoed continuously on the training ground. More than a dozen Imperial soldiers lined up in a long line, pulling the triggers awkwardly. Lead bullets flew out from the muzzles of the flaming guns and hit the target 50 meters away. A big hole was instantly pierced through the solid armor, and the wooden block behind was also smashed to pieces. Not bad power, No wonder the Imperial Expeditionary Army led by Edwell suffered a disastrous defeat at the hands of these people. Joshua looked at the muskets in the hands of these soldiers and said in a low voice, "Have you shown it to those craftsmen? Is there a way to copy it?" Lucia said with interest. "It is not a problem to copy the other parts of this kind of weapon, but this kind of steel pipe is very special." Joshua took a musket, and with a shake of his wrist, he dismembered it with divine magic, leaving only the barrel. Lucia took it and looked at it carefully for a while. She didn't find anything wrong. It was just an ordinary steel product. There was no trace of magic or divine arts. It has no cracks and no traces of connection, Joshua reminded softly. Lucia paused for a moment and then came to her senses. If ordinary craftsmen want to turn iron ore into hard steel, they must use high temperature to melt it and then temper it. The steel pipe in front of her is 1 meter long, but its diameter is only a few dozen millimeters. It looks seamless, and there is even a thread-like structure inside. This is indeed very magical. Could it be that magic was used? Cardinal Sirid reminded her. Unlikely. Lucia shook her head. Only great wizards have the ability to control metal elements. Although there is no problem in making such a steel pipe, as far as she knows, there are only 30 great wizards in the entire parliament, and there are tens of thousands of muskets. How long will it take for dozens of great wizards to make it? Then I don't have to do anything else every day, just rubbing the steel pipes there. Just think about it and you know it's impossible. It's really a waste of talent. Lucia thought for a while and felt that there were two feasible solutions. For example, find an extremely hard material, put it in the middle of the molten iron, and then forge it, or prepare a mold and pour the molten iron into it. After Lucia finished speaking, Joshua tactfully told her that similar methods had been tried by those craftsmen. As a result, the steel pipes produced were not up to standard at all. When they were reinstalled on the muskets, the accuracy would become very poor. One of the muskets even exploded directly. Lucia was quite surprised. It seemed that the wizards really made some interesting things. What about the captured personnel? Don't they know about it? In addition to seizing a large number of muskets in this battle, hundreds of musketeers were also captured. The method of using muskets was also searched out from the minds of these people. They were all poor people who hoed the fields and fished before. They only knew how to use them and didn't know how to make such weapons at all. At this point, Joshua paused and then said again, "These people have been corrupted by the evil spirits. Unless we use coercive means, we can't get any information from them. Are there no exceptions?" Lucia raised her eyebrows. "It stands to reason that there will always be a few spineless people among these hundreds of people." "No exceptions," Joshua said solemnly. He searched the memories of these people and probably found the reason. These musketeers were a group of poor people who were starving and freezing before. Most of them had families. Joining the musketeers can only be described as a step up to heaven. The price offered by the parliament is very high. As long as you become a musketeer, you can get 15 to 20 silver coins per month and live a life of eating meat every day. If you die on the battlefield, you can also get a generous pension, and your family will be properly settled and arranged to work in the workshop. This treatment is higher than the most elite guards of the empire, and it is almost catching up with the God's punishment army. Therefore, most of the musketeers are in a state of fanaticism similar to faith, and their hearts are corrupted by money. It can only be said that those wizards have also spent a lot of money to deal with the Empire's crusade. While the two were talking, the Imperial soldiers demonstrating the muskets loaded the bullets with difficulty, and then fired another volley, smashing the target in front of them. It takes more than a minute to load the bullets. In my opinion, the weapons of these wizards are just so-so. They are not as useful as an archer on the battlefield. Seeing that the two adults were so concerned about this evil creation called a musket, Sirid couldn't help but speak out. As a conservative bishop, Sirid has always been very vigilant about these witchcraft weapons. According to the Church's constitution, destroying them once they are discovered is the most important thing to do. Moreover, it takes more than a minute to fire a bullet. This shortcoming is fatal. If a shot misses, there will be no ability to resist next. Sirid believes that even if he encounters a whole team of musketeers, he has 100 ways to put the opponent to death, or even play with them in his hands. Joshua is naturally also clear about the shortcomings of this thing. But this still cannot cover up the advantages of a musket. Do you know how long it takes to train a qualified imperial archer? About half a year, Sirid said hesitantly. 3 to 5 years, Joshua corrected. The requirements for personnel are also very demanding, and they need to be selected from strong soldiers. And it only took them 2 or 3 hours to learn how to operate the musket. Joshua pointed to the imperial soldiers who were testing their weapons. The most important thing is that the musket has a strong armor-piercing ability, which is incomparable to the crossbow. In previous battles, a knight in fine armor could charge and kill at will on the battlefield, and a few stray arrows could not break through the defense at all. Now the situation is different. I'm afraid that a musket can kill him. This improvement is undoubtedly terrifying. In other words, those wizards only need to grab a poor person on the street and train for a few hours, and the opponent may kill a knight who has practiced his skills for decades on the battlefield. According to reports from several knights of the God's Punishment Army, the wizards have loaded a special musket on a moving iron box, which can fire dozens of bullets in 1 second, and even a bishop will be torn to pieces on the spot. Joshua said solemnly. Apparently, the wizards have found a way to overcome the defects of the musket, but they have not yet deployed it on a large scale. P.S. Chapter 2 is still around 2 or 3 o'clock. I have a lot of work to do this week, so it is a little unstable. Please forgive me. Chapter 413, The Roar of the Fire Dragon, How to Deal with the Airship. After Joshua's explanation, Sirid realized the horror of this new weapon. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and he hurriedly spoke out. We can't wait any longer. We must send all these evil minions to hell immediately. Sirid couldn't imagine how powerful witchcraft weapons these wizards could create if they were allowed to develop. We should have continued to pursue them if we had known earlier, Sirid said with regret. They finally won a great victory in a surprise attack, but failed to take the opportunity to annihilate them. Now it is obvious that another strong attack will cost extremely heavy casualties. Don't worry, Sirid, under the power of the Lord, all resistance is in vain, Joshua said comfortingly. They let the wizards' legions flee, on the one hand because the expeditionary army suffered heavy casualties and low morale, and on the other hand, they did it deliberately, using this legion as bait to attract the main force of the wizards. He knew very well that once Her Majesty the Saint exerted her full strength, those so-called new weapons would be as ridiculous as toys. However, after the war, this incarnation could no longer be used. It had to be replaced, and it would take several years to recover its strength. Your Highness Lucia, the divine arts you requested have been arranged. A nun walked in from outside the training ground and whispered respectfully in the ear of the saint. Lucia nodded, and with a thought, the seamless steel pipe in her hand was broken into basic elements. As long as the Wizard Council was swept, she would naturally be able to obtain the production and use skills of all new weapons. This is the fastest way. Several people walked out of the training ground together and soon stepped into the Cathedral of Mist territory. The Grand Duke who was in charge of the territory had made a lot of money in recent years by relying on the mining of kerosene. In order to show his piety to the Lord, this church was naturally built very high and large, and it was very solemn and majestic. In the square inches front of the church, hundreds of bishops were gathered here, holding the Bible and reciting prayers. Thick golden pillars were erected around them, and under their feet was a huge divine arts array with intricate patterns. Lucia stepped forward and stood in the center of the magic array. Praise my Lord, the great and eternal God. Your glory shines on the entire continent, and the stars are dimmed by it. Amid the devout hymns of the bishops, the statue of God in the church emitted a soft golden light, and then the same light appeared on Lucia's body. Then, a strong magic wave began to spread around, and the magic array engraved on the ground seemed to come alive. The space on the ground began to distort, and the neatly arranged bricks and stones completely disappeared from everyone's sight. The interior of the entire magic array was soon stained with a black curtain, just like water waves surging non-stop. The next moment, a huge and terrifying sharp claw drilled out from the dark and bottomless abyss, followed by the red body that seemed to be made of lava. The strong power made everyone present hold their breath. When the monster completely crawled out, Sirid saw clearly that it was a lava fire dragon. At the same time, Chains of divine arts rolled over from the pillars around it, locking the huge dragon body tightly. Roar! The lava dragon struggled violently, and the chains of divine arts were pulled and clanged, but the more it struggled, the tighter the chains that bound it would shrink. After trying several times, the lava dragon gave up this plan. Its ferocious pupils, which were as big as fists, stared at Lucia hanging above the black curtain, and then opened its mouth and exhaled a hot breath. This breath was so strong that the space seemed to be burning. The rolling heat wave even reminded Sirid of the hot beam that fell from the sky on the battlefield. "Your Majesty, Lucia!" Sirid shouted in fear, but then he found that his worries were unnecessary. The strong dragon breath began to weaken rapidly before it touched the Saint Asian dragon species. "It really doesn't have any brains." Lucia raised her hand, and the flames stopped in an instant. The whole lava dragon seemed to have its throat pinched, and it roared in pain. The chains of divine arts bound to the dragon's body began to dissolve and sank into the red dragon scales. Seeing Lucia easily subdue the lava fire dragon summoned across the border, Sirid couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, his opinion of Her Majesty the Saint chosen by the Church changed greatly. He no longer obeyed her because of his status, but was in awe and envy from the bottom of his heart. The other party must have received God's blessing to have such strength. The nuns around also had admiring expressions, fantasizing that one day they would also be chosen by the Lord, ascend to heaven in one step, and become the saint of the Church. After severely punishing the violent lava fire dragon, Lucia condensed a dragon-shaped gem and handed it to Sirid beside her. "You can control it." This gem was created by her power, connected to the divine arts that bound the lava fire dragon, and could then issue orders to it. "Thank you for your trust, Your Majesty." Lucia. Sirid took it flattered. Of course, he understood that the Saint Lady had gone to such great lengths to capture a lava dragon across the border. The purpose was obviously to deal with those airships. Sirid had heard before that this huge alchemical creature was highly maneuverable, with a speed of more than 100 kilometers per hour. It could also emit a powerful beam that destroyed hundreds of Griffin Knights. It was the most important air force in the hands of wizards. If they didn't find a way to contain it, more than 100 airships would be enough to defeat the entire expeditionary army. Now with the help of this lava dragon, it was different. This upper-level dragon was not only faster than the airship, but its dragon breath and innate magic could also be used in air combat. Those large airships with slow turning and evasion speeds were a living target in front of the lava dragon. "How are our soldiers? Have they recovered?" Lucia turned to look at Joshua on the side and asked. "Your Majesty, after the baptism of the priest's magic, they have overcome their fear of those witchcrafts." Joshua replied, "In that case, let's set off tonight," Lucia said firmly. The pillar of light that penetrated the sky and earth at noon left a deep impression on her. Although Lucia had figured out the principle of this magic and had found a way to deal with it, the most sensible thing to do was to avoid the enemy's strengths and not give them the opportunity to use them. Chapter 414, The Vatican's Surprise Attack and the Defeated Defenders. At midnight, in Mist Territory, 50,000 Imperial expeditionary forces arrived at the city quietly under the cover of the legendary magic, the realm of illusion. "It seems that these wizards are really capable." Joshua looked at the towering wall in front of him and whispered to himself. The last time he came, there was only a low wall less than 3 meters high in this small town in the border territory, but now there is a 7-meter-high solid wall in front of them. The wizards actually used magic to complete such a miracle in just half a day. On the city wall, a bonfire was burning, and more than 1,500 guards could be vaguely seen stationed on the city wall. It seemed that they had not yet found their traces. The number of guards was much less than Joshua expected, but thinking of the previous battle, the musketeers also suffered heavy casualties. Now most of them should be recovering from their injuries and receiving treatment. In addition to the musketeers guarding the rest of the city and stationed in the city, the number is not much different. Joshua raised a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Those wizards probably couldn't imagine that they had restored the Imperial Guard's combat effectiveness in just 10 hours and launched a surprise attack overnight. "Your Highness Lucia, Lord Judge, do you want to launch an attack now?" Sirid asked respectfully. The distance of 700 meters was already the limit. If they got closer, Even if they were in the realm of illusion, they would be noticed to be wrong. As for the lava dragon, Sirid let it stay 10 miles away and wait until the moment of the battle to fly over, so as not to be sensed by the wizards. Lucia stretched out her right hand, and the boundless divine light gathered in the palm of her hand, shrinking into a thumb-sized ball, and then flew straight to the towering city wall 700 meters away. The soldiers on the city wall could only see a bright firefly floating towards this side in the dim night, at an extremely fast speed, and the distance of 700 meters could be said to be reached in an instant. Before they could even shout, the light expanded rapidly and then exploded. Boom boom. The deafening explosion resounded throughout the castle. The tall walls were shattered under the impact of the strong explosion. The city gate was directly blown open, and the rubble flew everywhere, forming a misty mist. Dozens of patrolling guards on the city wall were knocked to the ground by the aftermath of the explosion. Blood splattered, screams and wails resounded continuously. At the moment when Lucia made her move, domain, illusionary realm, was instantly broken, and more than 10,000 God Punishment Knights shouted for the glory of the Lord, and rushed into the city gate that had been opened from the hole. The raised scimitars and long swords chopped down the guards in the city one after another. Perhaps the timing of their action was too sudden, and the enemies had not yet reacted, or perhaps these people had already been defeated in the midday battle and their morale had not yet recovered. In this assault, there was no obstacle, and the Crusade army of the Holy See had already entered the city. It went too smoothly. Joshua felt a strong sense of uneasiness in his heart. After entering the city, they found that there was a torch placed on every street and many guards were deployed, but they did not encounter any effective resistance. There was no row of muskets shooting, no cannons, and no wizards. The whole city was quiet, with only the guards running away and shouting in fear. It was so weird that it was terrifying. What is going on? Sirid was confused and really couldn't figure out the situation. Where are their enemies? Where are those wizards? Just as everyone was wondering, a team of brave God's Punishment Knights captured the leader of the guards. He was a middle-aged man in his 30s, slightly thin, with a little fat on his cheeks. He knelt on the ground with a look of fear, kowtowed repeatedly, and said in a trembling voice, "My Lord Bishop, I surrender. I surrender. Please forgive my sins." "It was those damned wizards who cast a spell on us and forced us to help them defend this town." "Enough." Joshua interrupted the man's defense and asked coldly, "Tell me, where are those wizards?" They left 15 minutes ago in a flying house." The thin middle-aged man replied timidly, "You mean they have escaped?" Joshua frowned and said in surprise, "This is not impossible. After all, the power of the Empire and the Church is far from being comparable to the minions of these evil demons. The wizards have just experienced a rout and are carrying many wounded soldiers. It is normal for them to flee at the sight of the wind. It's just that the timing is so coincidental. Just 15 minutes before they arrived, their luck can only be described as bad." "Do you know which direction those wizards went?" Lucia suddenly asked. It's the north," the middle-aged man replied hesitantly. As soon as these words came out, the bishops present were all shocked, because the kingdom was to their west. If they wanted to evacuate, they couldn't fly to the north anyway. "Is there anything in the north?" Lucia asked doubtfully. "It's kerosene." Joshua's expression was very solemn. After searching the memories of the captives before, he had some doubts about this. Because the wizards launched this counterattack, the first goal should be to recover the lost territory of the kingdom first. The other two legions had been stranded in the kingdom before, which could prove this. The legion they encountered was the only exception. It took the initiative to break into the empire, and its target was missed territory. It was probably for kerosene. "These wizards must want to seize or destroy the empire's weapons of war," Sirid said indignantly. "The importance of kerosene is self-evident. In recent years, it has played a great role in the wars against the barbarians and the alien demons, reducing a large number of casualties." Lucia shook her head and did not agree with Sirid's guess. "Kerosene is useful, but it is not as good as the artillery that the wizards have. It should be that the Wizard Council has found other uses for kerosene." Lucia guessed. In the last battle against the kingdom, the Griffin Knights led by Vindel brought a lot of kerosene, which was most likely seized. Those wizards must have studied this thing and discovered some secrets, so they are very eager to get it. and even think that it can affect the outcome of the war to a certain extent, so they suddenly went to look for kerosene at such a critical moment. P.S. Chapter 2 is around 3 p.m. Chapter 415, Conspiracy, Lin En, who is as good as a god. Just as they were thinking about what secrets were hidden in the kerosene, more divine punishment cavalrymen came and reported the news they had discovered in the city. Just as the captain of the guard said, there was no enemy in the entire town, all the wizards had evacuated, and the guards who were temporarily assembled were responsible for the defense. It is said that each of them was under an evil spell, and if they did not obey orders, they would ooze pus all over their bodies and die of ulceration. The so-called tight defense and heavy garrison were all illusions. The wizards actually relied on an empty city as a deterrent, and wanted to delay them all here. They even built a solid high wall only on the side facing the kerosene city, and the other 3 sides were just for show. No wonder, Joshua said in a cold tone. He had thought that it would be impossible to strengthen the walls on all 4 sides in just a few hours. Obviously they were all fooled. Wait, if all those wizards have evacuated, then what is the magic I feel? Lucia paused and suddenly thought of this. Before entering the city, she felt a strong fluctuation of magic in the city, so she thought that the wizards were still gathering in the town. That should be the direction of the manor. Now, immediately, go and call back all the people who are going to the manor. Lucia's heart showed a trace of warning, and then she closed her eyes and used divine magic to send a message without waiting for the bishops to act. Unfortunately, it was still a step too late. As soon as the voice fell, a violent explosion sounded, and a strong flame came from the direction of the manor. This was the gift that Lin En left for them before leaving, a large amount of gunpowder. The manor was set up with magic that senses vibrations, and it would be detonated 3 minutes after detecting that a large number of people had entered the manor. Judging from the intensity of the explosion, the large number of elite soldiers who went to the manor to search were probably in danger. Joshua's expression was extremely ugly, and Lucia's face was also cold as ice. They have only been gone for more than 10 minutes, and they have to bring more than 8,000 people and heavy artillery with them. It is impossible to keep driving at full speed. It may still be in time to catch up now, Riddle reminded quietly. And kerosene is very important to the Empire, so there are still a large number of people stationed at the mining site, which should be able to delay for a while. When the captain of the guard saw Riddle propose to leave, he burst into tears and cried to the sky, "My lord, the judge, your majesty, I am the most devout believer of the Lord. I go to the church every week to listen to the teachings. Please, please save me." Joshua rushed forward and put his hand on the captain of the guard's head. After 3 or 5 seconds, the expression on his face became even uglier. "Idiot, you don't have any spells on you." The captain of the guard was completely dumbfounded, but he clearly saw a colleague who disobeyed the wizard's orders, and the whole person melted into a pool of blood in pain and screams. "That's just an illusion, a little trick of the wizards, just to scare you," Joshua explained, and then, regardless of whether the other party believed it or not, he turned to look at Lucia and asked to chase immediately and wipe out all these mean wizards. Once they get the kerosene, there might be another change and other troubles. "Riddle, you will be the vanguard and go to stop those airships. There is no need to attack them by force, just slow down their speed." Lucia suppressed her anger and ordered in a deep voice, "I understand, your majesty. I will never let those wizards take away the weapon of the Empire." Riddle knelt on one knee and responded decisively. "A huge lava fire dragon has fallen from the sky, and its heavy body has collapsed the hard bricks and stones. Its red eyes stared at the bishops in front of it, full of hatred, but its body and consciousness are still firmly bound by the magic." After Riddle cast a protective spell on himself, he jumped onto the dragon's back and flew into the sky. Hundreds of Griffin Knights followed behind him. At the same time, Riddle and others hiding outside the city also saw the huge dragon rising into the sky. TSK, what kind of monster is this, so big?" Ham said in astonishment. "It should be a dragon," Riddle said uncertainly. Although they had never seen a dragon, it was a frequent guest in many operas and bards, and was synonymous with cruelty and power. "It seems that Lord Lin En is right. These people really went to chase Riddle looked at the expeditionary army that had just entered the city and rushed out in a flash, heading north, and he was very impressed. This was exactly what Lin En expected. "Then shall we act now?" Ham rubbed his hands and said excitedly. "No, wait a little longer." Riddle shook his head and said cautiously, "Wait until they go a little further. Anyway, let's send a message first." "Excuse me, Lord Anthony." Riddle turned his head and looked at Anthony on the side. The latter nodded, closed his eyes and attracted the electromagnetic field around him, sending out the electromagnetic wave signal. Since the airship has only been about 20 minutes since it set off, the distance is not far, so there is no need to use a transfer station, and its speed is extremely fast. The next moment after Anthony cast the spell, Lin En and others on the airship had received the message. "Very good. Since they have caught up, then the battlefield will be decided by us." Beside him, Prv raised a smile at the corner of his mouth. Before, they were racking their brains to imagine how to deliberately lead the other party out and provide a suitable place to cast spells for the development of new magic. However, Lin En proposed another idea, which is to choose a place where the other party must defend when attacking. Kerosene is the best target. Once they show a strong desire for this thing, the Holy See will not let them succeed, and will definitely follow. This is a real conspiracy. What's more, they left a little gift in the city. If it goes smoothly, the other party must be furious, even losing their minds, right? After being fooled several times in a row, who wouldn't fight to the death? It's a pity that it's still too fast. We don't have time to make more arrangements, otherwise it should be foolproof, Lin En said helplessly. According to his previous estimate, the Holy See has just suffered thousands of casualties. Even if it is urgent, it will take half a day to rest and launch an attack tomorrow morning, but the opponent's actions are obviously much faster than he expected. Chapter 416. This is not scientific, but it is magical. Nothing is foolproof. Accidents can happen at any time. If we can ensure an 80% chance of winning, it's worth going all out, Prv said comfortingly. If it weren't for the method that Lin En had temporarily developed to detect the enemy's situation by sensing ground vibrations, they would probably not be able to escape the Vatican's surprise attack this time. The situation would be unpredictable. Even if they could win the battle, they would inevitably suffer heavy losses. The greater possibility is another defeat, or even a mutual destruction. In my opinion, there is no need to worry so much. We are lightly equipped this time. These people can only follow us and eat dust. It is not difficult to buy some time, Raphael said optimistically. It's not good to be too confident. Lin En shook his head, looked back, and said, "They have caught up." As he spoke, a terrifying dragon roar came from a distance. Under the gaze of everyone, a red fireball was rushing towards this side. When they got closer, they found that it was not a fireball, but a hideous monster with a wingspan of more than 20 meters. Its red scales looked like they were made of lava, and its eyes were bloodshot, revealing a murderous and brutal aura. "Is this a dragon?" Raphael's pupils shrank, and he immediately remembered the dragon disaster in the wizard's land decades ago. "It should be a sub-dragon species," Prv corrected. "So fast. The speed is at least 180 kilometers. How can such a big and heavy thing fly so fast with its flesh?" Lin En said in surprise. "Just with the pair of dragon wings, it is impossible to run at a speed of 100 kilometers per hour even if it is broken. In fact, it is difficult to even float." Prv and others looked at Lin En with strange eyes, not understanding why this magic star could say such a thing. His fighter jet made of steel also ran at a speed of 300 to 400 kilometers per hour. Lin En didn't know what everyone was thinking, otherwise he would definitely tell them that the fighter's flying method was very scientific, and this could only be said to be very magical. But at this moment, Lin En didn't have the energy to explore how the fire dragon in front of him flew up, because their enemy had entered the range of attack and spellcasting. Several machine guns set up at the back of the airship immediately opened fire, and dense bullets poured down like a torrential rain towards the lava fire dragon. However, although this fire dragon was huge, it was more flexible than they imagined. With its wings vibrating, it easily dodged the rain of bullets. "We should have predicted and aimed at the path ahead." Lin En shook his head. These machine gunners were still too young, and it was also related to the fact that they had too little training time and rushed into battle. Then the second line of defense formed by wizards followed one after another. A large number of fireballs, ice blades, and thunder power covered a large area. Since the opponent was extremely fast and flexible, it would be better to make it impossible for the opponent to dodge. However, this time, their target did not dodge, but opened his mouth and spit out a hot dragon breath. The thousands of degrees high temperature fire wave destroyed all the magic that attacked, and then rushed towards the airship array with dragon breath. The rolling fire wave came in an instant. Lin En took a step forward and stretched out his hand. His index finger and middle finger trembled slightly, and the invisible time and space rippled. The surging dragon breath was cut apart by the invisible force, and passed directly from the two sides of the airship. The rolling heat wave made the air distorted. Although the invisible, space vibration wave, is invisible to the naked eye, Sirid, as a cardinal, can sense this powerful force that is enough to cause space fluctuations. The lava fire dragon under him is also not weak in the perception of danger, and is even much stronger than Sirid. Before the space vibration wave approaches, it has already flown away, and the dragon breath also stops abruptly. After realizing that the airship was protected by a powerful wizard and difficult to destroy, Sirid directly avoided it and turned to other targets. There were more than 100 airships in the entire array, spreading 1 kilometer long. If such a weapon of war appeared on the battlefield, it would be able to easily defeat a legion of tens of thousands of people, but in Sirid's eyes, they were just targets. The 20-meter-long wings of the lava fire dragon shook violently, and the huge dragon body accelerated again, rushing towards an airship on the right, spewing out hot dragon breath, and the surging fire waves easily broke through the protection of the witchcraft barrier, engulfing the entire airship in the sea of fire. In an instant, flames shot up into the sky, the entire airship burned, and violent explosions echoed in the sky. Even though fireproof materials were used when making the airship airbag, they could not block such a terrifying high temperature, and the steel frame was directly melted and burned. The lava fire dragon leaped up again, avoiding dozens of flying ice blades. The thick dragon tail swung violently and hit the outer shell of the airship heavily, with a dull sound that made people's teeth ache. The iron guardrail was directly smashed to pieces, so that half of the cockpit burst directly and turned into a ball of fire falling to the ground. "Damn it, send a message, let them all disperse," Raphael shouted anxiously as an airship was shot down in a few seconds. Because the lava fire dragon rushed directly into the array of airships, they did not dare to cast a full-strength spell to counterattack, otherwise the opponent only needed to dodge and the attack would hit all the friendly forces. In fact, there was no need for Raphael to remind them, and the gathered airships had already dispersed to the surroundings. Sirid obviously would not miss this opportunity. He drove the lava dragon under him through the array of airships. Waves of fire rose up and painted the sky red in just 10 seconds. As the pilot, Ali watched an airship not far away from him being set on fire by the hot dragon's breath. He was angry and terrified. In the past, they had always relied on their extraordinary speed to play with the enemy in the palm of their hands. Obviously, now it is the opposite. Now their enemies are flying faster and more flexible than them. In this way, the disadvantages of the airship's large size and slow change of direction become extremely fatal. Facing the fire dragon's breath, they can't even dodge. "Damn it." Ali gritted his teeth and cursed secretly, then turned his head to look at the great wizard Sanchez of plastic science beside him, and spoke anxiously, "Master Wizard, are we just going to stand by and watch?" Sanchez was also a little anxious, but there was nothing he could do. The dragon was flying too fast, and it never stopped anywhere. Their magic either missed or was not enough to hurt the dragon. Just as Sanchez was hesitating whether to transform into a Dorga or giant eagle and fight the dragon to the death, the device that received the electromagnetic signal suddenly lit up. Chapter 417. The first-generation fighter's debut. The ticking sound continued to resound on the airship. Sanchez was shocked, and his anxious expression gradually cooled down. After deciphering the message, he immediately spoke. "Now, turn around." Alex, who was full of anger, was overjoyed. The other airship operators also worked 120% of their attention and controlled the airships to change direction. It was time for them to fight back. Sirid rode a huge fire dragon and raged in the air, but he didn't notice that the airships around him were not just fleeing. Dozens of airships quietly changed direction. Under Lin En's command, they quickly formed an array, and one after another lightning flashed on each airship. Chain lightning, thunder prison lightning storm. More than 50 thunder wizards cast spells together, and an electromagnetic field covering hundreds of meters in radius was formed instantly. By the time Sirid realized something was wrong, the blue-purple lightning had already occupied his entire field of vision. The divine barrier around him was cracked by the violent arc of electricity. The lava fire dragon under him roared, and the speed of flapping its dragon wings slowed down. Then, dozens of dense laser beams swept over from all directions. The lava fire dragon, which was paralyzed and unable to dodge, was like a huge target and was soon hit. The strongest laser beam chopped off the fire dragon's neck, tearing open the hard dragon scales. Blood like lava spurted out, dyeing the sky red. However, the rest of the laser beams were far less powerful. They only cut a little finger-thick scar on the hard dragon scales, and they couldn't even break the defense. So hard. Lin En was secretly shocked. The strongest laser magic was naturally his work, and it didn't kill it even when it hit the target. Not to mention the rest of the beam magic, they couldn't even cut the dragon scales. Although he had the airship array pull away to avoid accidental injuries, which weakened the power of the laser to a certain extent, its own powerful armor-piercing ability was enough to cut metal, but now it was even difficult to barely break the defense. From this point of view, even if the machine gun just hit successfully, the machine gun strafing alone would not be enough to hurt the opponent. This sub-dragon species is very resistant to fire and high temperature, and the distance is too far. If it is close enough, I think laser magic should still be useful, Rf said solemnly. Unfortunately, there is obviously only one such opportunity. After suffering a big loss, Sirid controlled the lava fire dragon to fly above them. This is the second weakness of the airship. Because the airbag is too large, it blocks the line of sight and there is no way to attack the enemy above the airship. This is the first time they have an absolute disadvantage in speed, and have finally experienced the frustration of not being able to hit the opponent in the past. If Vittorio was there, he might be able to seal off this piece of sky, restrict the opponent's actions, and then he would use the blade of time and space to kill him with one blow. However, Vittorio and Aurora went ahead to arrange the next battlefield. At this moment, a series of sharp and piercing whistles suddenly sounded in the sky, and a dark shadow appeared in the distance. It's the Griffin Knight. Prv frowned slightly. They could barely deal with a fire dragon, but if these Griffin Knights got close to them, it would be easy to cause serious damage to the airship array. In the previous air battle in the capital, they relied on laser magic to achieve an absolute victory. But this was based on the debut of the new magic and the lack of intelligence. It won't be so easy now. Sure enough, after these Griffin Knights approached, they flew directly into the sky, ready to destroy the airbag of the airship from above and let it fall on its own, without any intention of fighting with them. However, Lin En's expression relaxed and he said, "Don't worry, our support has arrived." This support is naturally Lydia's new fighter. Since this thing doesn't carry much fuel, has limited endurance, and is equipped with a powerful weapon, Lin En didn't let Lydia drive a fighter jet to support until he confirmed that the church had really caught up. Now he arrived at the same time as the Griffin Knight. Come on, we must not let this group of shameful scum and the minions of the devil seize the Empire's war weapon. A Griffin Knight raised his warhammer and roared loudly, "Kill these blasphemers! Charge! Charge!" The shouts were like thunder, and hundreds of Griffin Knights were in high spirits. They rushed to the outer airships like wolves and tigers, determined to wash away the shame of repeated defeats before. But before they finished speaking, bursts of machine gun roars rang out, and the Griffin Knights who shouted charge were drowned in the rain of bullets in full view of the public, and their bodies were directly shot into sieves. Damn it, what on earth is going on? Where are the enemies? Enemy attack! Enemy attack! A series of shrill voices echoed in the sky, and the Griffin Knights, who were originally so powerful, suddenly became a mess. Several invisible fighters with polarization magic rushed past. The fireworks of machine guns flashed in the air, and the machine gun barrage instantly pierced the bodies of the Griffin Knights, tearing them to pieces. Blood splattered and screams came one after another. Although the Griffins have an amazing sense of smell, optical stealth has little effect on them. But the speed of the fighters is too fast, and they have no way to rely on smell alone to confirm the enemy's position. And those fighters are like invisible death gods under the cover of polarization magic and the night, constantly harvesting the lives of the Griffin Knights. During the period of launching counterattacks and retaking the king, the wizards of the alchemy workshop once again produced and modified 4 magic fighters. The pilots were also selected from the best wizards. Even if they were a little neglected in training, they were enough to deal with these Griffin Knights. Lydia, who was the most skilled in driving, aimed at the huge lava dragon in the airship array. As the button for the machine gun firing was pressed, the machine guns installed on the 2 wings opened again, and the chain of bullets continued to hit the back of the fire dragon. Sparks splashed out, and there was a dull sound of steel hitting each other, so hard. Lydia made the same sigh as Lin En. You know, the machine guns of the fighter jets did not use lead bullets, but more powerful fixed bullets, but they were actually broken by the dragon scales. However, Lydia was not discouraged. She directly increased her speed to the extreme and rushed straight towards the huge fire dragon in front of her. Chapter 418 First Generation Fighter vs. Lava Fire Dragon. The continuous barrage of bullets did not attract Sirid's attention, because the lava fire dragon had to face the counterattack of wizards all the time while destroying the airship. As for Sirid himself, most of his energy was spent on suppressing the lava fire dragon under him and constructing a protective magic, and he could not spare too much energy to detect the attack that came from nowhere. However, his underestimation of the enemy was obviously fatal. The fighter plane with a speed of 360 km per hour was as fast as a gust of wind, and it had crossed a distance of hundreds of meters in the blink of an eye, before colliding head-on with the huge dragon body. Lydia tried her best to deflect the fuselage and pulled the red wrench next to it to the lowest end. At the moment of intersecting with the dragon body, a strong laser beam shot out from the front of the fuselage. The top of the fighter plane was like a nearly infinitely long, indestructible sword, and the distance between the 2 sides was less than 30 meters. Lydia could even see the chain-like divine spell patterns on the red dragon scales. Such a close distance undoubtedly brought the power of the laser beam to its extreme. The hard dragon scales were cut in an instant, and the fighter plane whizzed past, leaving a blood mark several meters long from east to west on the huge dragon. Blood was all over the sky, and the huge dragon roared continuously. What on earth is this? Sirid, who was slow to realize it, did not realize that something was wrong until the fire dragon under him was injured. He could only vaguely sense that something had invaded his territory, flashing by, and its speed was unimaginable. After being hit hard again, the lava fire dragon was already furious, and its red eyes kept looking for the enemy who attacked it. But the polarization magic was very effective in hiding in the dark night. It could only feel the airflow when the fighter plane passed by and the buzzing sound of the propeller. The fire dragon opened its mouth wide, and the hot dragon breath kept spewing out, sweeping towards the place where the sound came from. But the speed of the fighter plane was too fast. Under Lydia's control, it was like a flexible fish, shuttling through the fierce dragon's breath, and even firing engine cannons from time to time to fight back, accompanied by a burst of fierce machine gun sound. Continuous rain of bullets reappeared. In just 10 seconds, hundreds of bullets were fired, continuously hitting the body of the fire dragon. Although most of them were broken by the hard dragon scales, there were also many wounds oozing blood, which aggravated the injuries again. The red blood continued to fall along the dragon's tail. Amid the roar of anger and pain, the hot dragon's breath became more and more fierce, and the whole dragon directly crashed into the direction of the rain of bullets. Lydia was very brave, but she also knew that her fighter plane could not go head-to-head with a dragon, and the burning dragon's breath also affected the battle to a certain extent. After all, she was able to see in the dark and hit the target accurately. Naturally, she relied not only on vision, but also benefited from the magic of sensing heat. This is why the pilots of fighter planes must be selected from wizards. Fortunately, The battle is not about who is bigger or who has more powerful magic. If you can't hit anyone, these advantages are meaningless. Lydia obviously implemented the word wandering to the extreme. She always kept a certain distance, circled around the huge fire dragon, and occasionally started the cannon to attack, constantly harassing and provoking the irritable fire dragon, and occasionally found the right opportunity to use laser beams to get close to it. According to the dean, the more angry and irrational the enemy is, the more chances there are. As for Sirid on the dragon's back, this target is too small. It can't be found at all under the magic of sensing heat. It is covered by the huge heat source of the fire dragon. In addition, the fire dragon itself is moving all the time. It is a fantasy to hit such a small target in the night sky with limited vision, so Lydia put all her energy on dealing with this dragon. The two sides fought for several minutes, and the dragon had more than a dozen shocking wounds on its body. The lava dragon, which was already on the verge of going berserk, completely lost control. Its dragon breath covered the sky, its tail swung wildly, and it attacked aimlessly. Lydia narrowly avoided the dragon's tail swing, and then a round of shooting hit the dragon's body. This vitality is too strong. Lydia looked at the lava dragon that kept wailing but still did not fall, and was secretly shocked. She had never seen a creature that was hit by so many laser beams and was still full of vitality under the machine gun's strafing. The fighter's reserve of 4,000 rounds of ammunition had been consumed by 80%, and the energy for the laser beam was less than 1/3 left. It seemed that they could only save some ammunition and slowly exhaust the opponent's physical strength and vitality. Lydia didn't believe that this thing was immortal. The fighter plane still had most of the fuel left. If it dragged on, she would definitely be the winner. Enough, stop. Sirid grabbed a spike on the dragon's back tightly to avoid being thrown off, and infused a large amount of divine energy into the dragon-shaped gem, forcing the lava fire dragon under him to stop the meaningless attack. Their goal was not to fight with an invisible and unreachable target here, but to delay time and destroy those airships as much as possible. These alchemical creations were loaded with the main force of those wizards. Every time one was shot down, hundreds of musketeers and wizards died. Under Sirid's constant driving, the irritable lava fire dragon finally poured all its anger and frustration on those airships that had not yet escaped far. Lydia saw that the fire dragon, which had become hysterical under her tease, suddenly turned around to chase those airships, and immediately followed eagerly, and turned on the amplification array added by those alchemists, and mocked loudly, "Come and fight me, I'm right here." Lydia provoked for a while, and seeing that the dragon was still chasing the airship, she cursed angrily. Only cowards would run away. Sirid ignored Lydia's words and controlled the fire dragon under him to constantly change its position to reduce the frequency of being hit by the laser beam. Although the lava fire dragon still looked alive and kicking, Sirid, who had the dragon-shaped gem to sense the other party's state, understood that these injuries were draining its vitality bit by bit, but it was not obvious because of its anger. While the lava fire dragon can still hold on, he needs to destroy these airships as much as possible to stop the other party from going to the source of kerosene. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 419 Dragon Slaying Skills, 5th level. Seeing another airship submerged under the dragon's breath, Lydia was extremely angry, but there was nothing she could do. The machine gun and the front laser beam are the two most powerful weapons of the fighter, but these two obviously cannot cause fatal damage to the fire dragon, and can only injure the opponent. Lydia couldn't help but focus her eyes on the not-so-eye-catching black button in the fighter's control panel. The first-generation machine she took was quite special. It had been specially modified and had an additional bomb-dropping function compared to other fighters. However, the dean had told her before leaving that the things loaded on the fighter this time were very powerful and very dangerous. If she was not careful, it might cause irreversible consequences. It must be used only when she received an order when the situation was most critical. Although Lydia didn't know what it was, it must be something very powerful, Very powerful. It should be called a crisis now, right? If it goes on like this, everyone will be knocked down by this dragon. Just as Lydia hesitated, a voice sounded beside her. Now is not the time to use that. The sudden sound scared Lydia so much that the fighter plane almost crashed into the airbag of the airship next to it. It seems that your driving skills need to be doubled up. Lin En, who appeared inexplicably in the co-pilot seat of the fighter plane, said disappointedly. Lydia rolled her eyes. She was concentrating on thinking about how to deal with the fire dragon just now, but a voice suddenly came out beside her. It would be strange if she was not scared to death. However, Lydia did not refute or complain, but said with surprise, "Dean, why are you here? I asked those alchemists to set up a small magic on this fighter plane, which can project some magic power and will when necessary." Lin En explained. This fighter plane was one of his backups. He also made a lot of suggestions for the subsequent transformation. Naturally, it was impossible not to make some preparations. "What should we do now?" Lydia asked with a frown. The dragon was too difficult to deal with. She had tried her best but still couldn't kill it. "I will prepare the spell to kill this dragon. You try to get as close as possible and delay it for a while," Lin En said directly. "Okay." Lydia's frown suddenly relaxed. She always had 100% trust in the Dean. She immediately drove the fighter plane towards the fire dragon again. Lin En took apart the energy supply system of the laser launcher and took out a ruby placed inside. The laser launcher installed on the fighter plane can release a laser beam of the 4th energy level with a diameter of about 0.3 millimeters. It is already a special grade. It can tear steel relatively easily. Such strength can only barely break the protection of the dragon's scales within 30 meters and cannot cause fatal injuries. It can be seen how high the defense of this thing is. Then he can only take the risk and try to upgrade it to the 5th energy level. The so-called 5 energy levels of laser light correspond to the 5 orbits of electrons in atoms. The principle is that electrons first absorb energy, jump from low energy level to high energy level, and then fall from high energy level to low energy level. In this process, the absorbed energy will be released in the form of light. The reason why he did not try to raise the laser beam to the highest energy level before was that the state of the 5th energy level was difficult to control. If the absorbed energy was slightly higher than this amplitude, the element would directly turn into a plasma state. If it was slightly lower, it would immediately fall back to the 4th energy level. And now, in order to deal with this fire dragon, I can only try my best. Fortunately, there is a high-quality ruby on the fighter plane that can be used to cast laser magic. Otherwise, with the state of this magic incarnation, it is impossible to release such a powerful spell. Lin En closed his eyes and concentrated on casting the spell. The fist-sized ruby kept spinning between his closed hands. Then, a series of reflection layers appeared around the ruby and included it. While Lin En was casting the spell, Lydia had already taken action and approached the huge lava dragon again. She no longer saved ammunition and the fierce sound of machine guns rang out again. A series of sparks burst out and hit the already bloody body. The scales on the body kept falling off, revealing flesh like lava. The fire dragon, which was constantly harassed, was furious. While swinging its tail to try to drive away the reptile, it poured more anger on the airship. In just half a minute, the remaining machine guns had been fired. The distance between the two sides was already very close. Lydia hurriedly called out, "Dean, are you almost done?" "Okay, aim at the head, go." Lin En opened his eyes and spoke very quickly. The round reflective mirror in his hand shook violently and could get out of control at any time. Inside the invisible interior, the ruby was already shining to the extreme. "Charge! Charge!" Lydia excitedly pulled the acceleration lever to the bottom fighter plane, whistling towards the huge lava fire dragon, and then suddenly turned at the moment of collision, flying past the dragon's side. At the moment when the two sides intersected, a beam of light as thick as a hair shot out from the reflective layer. Seared on the dragon's back also noticed that the field was invaded, and then an extremely bright light appeared in front of him, passing directly across the dragon's body. The powerful power made Seared feel a breath of death. Fortunately, this beam of light only flashed and disappeared soon, and the lava fire dragon under him did not seem to be affected too much, which made Seared slightly relieved. Caca. The next moment, a slight cutting sound rang in Sirid's ears, and then, under the horrified gaze of Sirid's target, the dragon-shaped gem in his hand exploded directly. The dragon body, which was flying by inertia, sprayed a large amount of blood. With a painful roar, the huge dragon head was cut in half. Sirid's left arm was also cut off. It was not only the fire dragon that was hit by the laser beam, but also him. However, the beam came too fast and had already passed through his body the moment he saw it. Seeing the huge dragon body being cut in two, and the corpse falling like a rag, Lydia muttered to herself, "Amazing." Lin En, who was in the co-pilot seat, also breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that his theory was correct. His luck was also good. The ruby in the palm of his hand had completely turned into plasma and could no longer be used. Chapter 420. The expeditionary army is caught in a dilemma. As the lava dragon fell, the wizards on the airship breathed a sigh of relief. They had solved this big problem and were finally safe. As for the Vatican's Griffin Knights, they were even more vulnerable under the harassment of several fighter jets, and they kept falling from the sky like dumplings. The bishops on the ground also saw this scene. Seeing the powerful fire dragon summoned by the Saint Lady was beheaded in an instant, and the Griffin Knights were beaten without any ability to fight back, they were all shocked and angry, but they could do nothing. Most importantly, under the cover of darkness and polarized magic, they could not see how the Griffin Knights were killed. "Lord Joshua, Saint Lady, why don't we withdraw our troops first?" a cardinal carefully advised. Without the fire dragon, the Griffin Knights were also severely damaged. They lost miserably in the air battle, which also meant that they lost their power to restrain the airship. Then the next battle would need to face the threat from the air at all times. They might even fall into the dilemma of being chased and beaten like in the battle in the Sea of Mist. However, before Lucia could reply, this proposal was strongly opposed by the bishops. "Do you mean to hand over the weapon of the Empire and watch those minions of the evil demon slaughter the Lord's people? Absolutely not allowed. This is simply a shame." The bishops argued with red ears, and in the sky, a griffin hit by a machine gun fell towards this side. Lucia ignored the bishops' arguments and stretched out her hand. A soft divine light appeared, and the falling griffin slowed down and finally landed steadily on the ground. This poor griffin, with half of its wings broken, made bursts of wailing sounds, and still had a little consciousness. The knight on top was shot into a sieve by the machine gun, and no one knew where his body flew to. The rain of divine blessing. Lucia gently stroked the griffin's head, and the mist containing the glory of divine magic immediately enveloped the broken body. The body pierced by the machine gun recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the broken wings grew back again. The recovered griffin seemed to have not yet recovered from the fear, and it made a series of hissing sounds from time to time. Lucia threw her white robe and sat on the back of the giant beast neatly, and suppressed the griffin's fear with divine magic. The bishops did not care about arguing at this moment, and looked at the saint in doubt. "Lord Lucia, you don't want to go into battle yourself, do you? This is too dangerous, and if you are alone, I'm afraid it will be useless." A cardinal hurriedly stopped him. Although the powerful force that Lucia had shown when she summoned and enslaved the fire dragon had greatly changed their views on the saint, they still did not approve of her taking risks alone. After all, the saint represented the face of the church and was a servant of God, so she must not be easily involved. Not to mention that after being elected, Lucia had been living a life of luxury in the holy city and had no combat experience at all. Even if she was strong, she might not be able to perform well. While speaking out to dissuade them, the bishops turned to look at Joshua, hoping that the judge could stop Lucia's reckless behavior. However, Joshua did not do as they wished, but asked respectfully, "Do you need us to do anything, Your Majesty?" Lucia glanced at the scattered airships in the sky again, and then said decisively, "Take some people and return to the city of Fireoil immediately." "There are too few of them," Lucia murmured. As soon as the voice fell, the rested griffin spread its wings and flew into the sky. The dust raised made more than a dozen bishops frown. But what confused them even more was Lucia's words. "Return to the city of Fireoil? Does it mean that they should retreat first, or should some people evacuate first?" "Do it." Joshua looked at the bishops without any hesitation and gave a direct order. I will lead a part of the divine punishment knights to the city of fire oil immediately. Ragnar, you will be responsible for the next command. But, Lord Judge, Cardinal Ragnar hesitated. Such a chaotic and irrational order, should they still obey it? The other bishops were also very dissatisfied, thinking that it was just Lucia who had no war experience and relied on her noble status to give random orders. Amid the doubts, Joshua slowly spoke. Her Majesty has received divine revelation, and her instructions are the will of the Lord. Ragnar and the others immediately shut up, because they knew that the chief judge would never joke about this matter. After giving a few instructions, Joshua took 3,000 divine punishment knights and set off for the city of fire oil. At the same time, the divine punishment knights who went to find and treat the wounded also turned back. Those griffin knights who were hit by lasers and machine guns and fell from the sky were basically dead, and the airships shot down by the flames were no exception, and not a single one was found alive. Ragnar's mind moved, and he suddenly asked, "Have you checked those airships? How many bodies are there on them?" "There should be less than 20, the knight who reported back answered hesitantly. Most of the airships were almost burned by the hot dragon's breath before they crashed, and the bodies were completely in disarray, but there would definitely not be more than this number. Only 20. Ragnar's pupils shrank slightly, and a chill rose in his heart. He immediately realized a problem that they had always ignored. They saw only more than 100 airships, and according to previous speculation, after the battle, the wizard's army had about 8,000 people, not counting the subsequent reinforcements. In other words, each airship must be loaded with 70 to 80 people, and they must also carry those heavy new weapons. This is absolutely impossible. Not only Ragnar, but all the bishops reacted quickly and immediately understood why Her Majesty the Saint suddenly asked them to dispatch people to support the city of fire oil. Because the main force of the wizards is not here at all, they are probably still stranded in that town, just creating the illusion that they have evacuated, so that everyone will go to chase the airship. Realizing this, Ragnar's forehead was suddenly sweating. On one side is a very important kerosene field, and on the other side is the fortress and fortified city in the west of the empire. What is the real target of those wizards? P.S. Chapter 2 is around 230. Chapter 421. This is a strategy of attacking the enemy and then secretly crossing Chenkang to rescue them. At midnight, the blazing bonfire illuminated the dark square. Tens of thousands of poor people lined up in the night. The captain of the guard, Lin En, held a long whip with thorns in his hand and said fiercely, "Hand over the coins you received. If anyone dares to hide them, ask the whip in my hand first." "I remember it should be 12 silver coins," Lin En sneered. The poor people present looked at each other, and after a while, a ragged poor man spoke cautiously. "Lord Lin En, did you remember it wrong? It should be 10 silver coins." After the wizards occupied the town, they carried out a purge, hanged a large number of nobles and bullies who committed many evil deeds on weekdays, and distributed most of the confiscated property. Each poor man received 10 silver coins as compensation for being exploited and enslaved by the nobles. Although wizards have become synonymous with evil under the propaganda of the church, most of the poor people who live in poverty still accepted the money in the face of the real temptation of money. "You want to fool me?" Lin En raised a hideous smile at the corner of his mouth, and he suddenly raised the long whip in his hand and whipped the poor man hard. A crisp sound of snap came out, and the unfortunate poor man screamed and his cheeks swelled up. "I said 12, that's 12. Lin En snorted coldly, and whipped again. The unfortunate poor man fell to the ground in pain, trembling all over. Lin En stared at the fearful eyes of the other poor people, and his heart was full of joy. Those damn wizards looted every noble manor, and his Lin En family was no exception. What made him even more incomprehensible was that the wizards actually distributed a large amount of treasure to these untouchables. Lin En thought that some poor people must have colluded with the wizards in secret and reported the news secretly to get these rewards, otherwise, who would complain about too much money? In view of this, Lin En reported the collusion between these poor people and the wizards to the bishop. He was given the right to punish these poor people and take back the looted wealth. He was also ready to teach these rebels a lesson. The extra 2 silver coins were the punishment. Under Lin En's threat, The people who dared not speak out could only hand over their only financial resources. Those who did not pay enough money would be beaten. Paying 2 more silver coins may not seem like much, but most of the poor people are already poor and destitute, and this will undoubtedly cost them their lives. One of the poor people couldn't even pay a single silver coin. As the most devout believer of the Lord, he firmly believed that those wizards had bad intentions and must have cast some kind of evil witchcraft on the money, so he didn't go to collect the compensation at all. However, Lin En didn't care so much. He didn't believe that anyone would not want the silver coins in their hands. He opened the whip and lashed, and all his anger towards the wizards was poured on these poor people. He completely forgot that half an hour ago, he also knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness from the presiding judge and the saint. In just 1 minute, Lin En beat this devout believer to death, just as he was about to whip him to death to deter the other poor people who wanted to lie. A fierce gunfire suddenly came from outside the city. This sound. Is it artillery? Lin En suddenly shuddered, and a fear from the bottom of his heart rose in his heart, because a few days ago those wizards also used that kind of fierce artillery fire to blast open the solid city gate. But how could this be possible? Didn't those wizards take the airship to attack the kerosene site? They should be fleeing in panic at this time because of the attack by the Vatican. Could it be that the attack was defeated? Lin En was unwilling to believe this possibility, but soon he saw hundreds of city guards throwing away their armor and running towards this side. Run! It's the wizards! Those wizards are back again! Several city guards shouted at the top of their lungs, and then they were knocked to the ground by a round of muskets. In the reflection of the moonlight in the bonfire, thousands of wolf-like musketeers were rushing towards this side in the distance. Lin En was so scared that he immediately ordered the guards beside him to stop them, and he grabbed a war horse and planned to escape. The angry poor were naturally not ready to watch Lin En leave. They rushed over and dragged him off his horse. Then they punched and kicked him, and even bit and scratched him with their teeth and nails. Get out of here, you lowly people! When the judge arrives, you will all be thrown into purgatory. Lin En shouted in panic, but his guards had already run away. He alone could not resist the beating of this group of mobs. Under the iron fist of justice, he soon fell silent. At this time, the musketeers had also rushed to the square where people gathered. The poor were both panicked and afraid to wait for the judgment of the wizards. However, after the first Red learned about the situation, he directly asked people to redistribute the silver coins that Lin En had confiscated, and the believers who were dying from the long whip were also treated. However, after the physical injuries were healed by magic, this devout believer seemed a little lost, as if he had lost his soul. The poor people who got the coins back again were full of disbelief, and a vague idea came to their minds. It seems that under the rule of wizards, there is nothing wrong. At least no one will want to take away their remaining savings. After a surprise attack, the musketeers quickly regained control of the city. The expeditionary army was busy chasing, and the defense force left after the capture was very weak, so they hardly suffered many casualties. Lin En is really as good as a god, Red couldn't help but sigh in his heart. In the battle at noon, they lost a lot of artillery and armored vehicles, and they were carrying nearly 3,000 wounded soldiers. It was obviously not a suitable move to confront the expeditionary army of the Holy See, but it was also difficult to evacuate. There were only more than 100 airships, and it was impossible to take everyone away. So Lin En proposed to hide the main force outside the city, and then create a false impression that they were riding an airship to rob kerosene, so as to lead the Vatican's punitive army away. When the punitive army left and the enemy let down their guard, they would fight back and even take down the kerosene city that was not on guard. According to Lin En, they used the strategies of empty city, attacking the enemy and rescuing them, sneaking through Chenkang, and luring the tiger away from the mountain. So many wizards were very curious about what this magic star did before arriving in the wizard's land. Could he be a great lord of the empire? Otherwise how could he know so many tactical skills? Chapter 422. This is a battle that only legendary wizards can participate in. You and I are just burdens, Master Wizard. Shall we go to the city of kerosene now? After Red settled the poor people gathered in the square, he looked at Anthony and asked, Yes, It's better to go sooner rather than later. There shouldn't be many garrisons in the city of Kerosene now. Anthony nodded, then smiled and said, they never expected that we would launch a counterattack now. Now all the plans are going very smoothly. The Holy See has sent out its best troops for the decisive battle tonight. No more than 3,000 people will stay in the city of Kerosene. The most important thing is that the two legendary clergymen should not be there, and no one can stop their attack. What about Dean Lin En? Riddle paused and said with a little hesitation, the enemy's main force has been transferred away. The battle on their side is indeed very smooth, but Riddle can't help but worry about the situation on the other side. Because there are less than 2,000 troops on the airship, how can they deal with the offensive of the 50,000 punitive troops of the Holy See? Don't worry, I think Master Lin En has his own plan, Anthony said comfortingly, and this is a battle that only legendary wizards can participate in a sense. You and I are just a burden. Anthony shook his head when he said this. He realized this when he was discussing how to deal with the Vatican's expeditionary army, because the focus of the speaker's discussion was on how to lead the legendary clergy of the Vatican to the right place so that Lin En's new magic could be successfully performed, and then how to avoid injuries to their own people. It can be seen that the speakers have great confidence in the power of this new magic, and they don't even take the tens of thousands of Vatican's expeditionary army seriously. The reason why they decided to use the airship to complete the bait task is because this thing runs faster. If everything goes well, we may be able to go back to support and see Master Lin En's new magic from a distance, Anthony said expectantly. Riddle was also very curious about what kind of magic could give Lord Lin the confidence to defeat those legendary clergymen who could perform the magic of the gods and tens of thousands of expeditionary forces. Just as Riddle led the musketeers to raid the city of Kerosene, the battle in the sky also ushered in new changes. Hundreds of Griffin Knights quickly lost their morale under the pursuit of new fighters and could only flee in all directions. It's not that no one wants to chase the airship and die with the enemy before dying, but the problem is that without the harassment of the fire dragon, they can't catch up with these alchemical creations at full speed. Because of his proficiency in plasticity, flying experience, and a certain talent in mathematics, Athos was successfully selected as the pilot of the first batch of fighters. He was also very interested in this new type of alchemical creation. Its speed far exceeded any flying creature he knew, more than 3 times that of the airship, and it was not enough to describe it as a lightning speed. Ardos pushed the magic of heat source perception to the extreme, and those escaping Griffin Knights turned into huge red dots, which were very eye-catching in the night sky. They only needed to aim at the target and open the machine gun to shoot. Just when Ardos found the next target and was ready to send the opponent on the road, he sensed that a Griffin Knight was flying towards the side from below. Lucky guy, going against the trend. It's really brave, Ardos exclaimed in admiration, thinking that it was a Griffin Knight who was shot down by them. After healing his injuries, he returned to the sky to participate in the battle. He couldn't help but feel a little admiration in his heart. For such an enemy, naturally, you have to go all out. Ardos immediately turned to face it head-on. In his perception, the red dot was getting closer and closer, and his machine gun was already in place. When the distance was only 300 meters, Yasso suddenly pressed the remote control lever, and red flames burst out from the cannon muzzle, and a chain of bullets appeared in the sky. The huge red dot did not dodge or evade, and the sharp cannon soon hit the front. It's so easy. A smile appeared on Yasso's face, but then he found that these cannons shot out were like a drop in the ocean, and they could not shoot down the opponent at all. Only then did he vaguely realize that something was wrong. Then a strong warning surged in his heart, and Yasso subconsciously deviated from the direction. But it was too late. A burst of steel being torn apart rang in his ears, and sparks flew everywhere, which was very eye-catching in the dark night. Yasso's only felt his body shake, and his entire chest seemed to explode. With the excellent dynamic vision of the shaping wizard, he clearly saw that it was a yellow-orange bullet that hit him. The opponent actually bounced all the cannon attacks back. Hundreds of bullets directly tore apart most of the fuselage, and the entire fighter immediately stalled and fell irreversibly to the ground. Yasuo endured the severe pain in his body and used electromagnetic magic to send a warning message. Then, before the fighter completely fell, he opened the top protective cover and jumped out. Batwing transformation. In the air, Yasuo's back muscles began to deform and extend from the shoulder blades, and a pair of huge wings 3 meters long were formed in just 1 second. Although the shaping magic he studied did not receive the recognition of a group of masters and was not awarded the Morning Star Medal, it seems to be of some use now. As the electromagnetic wave signal was sent out, the wizards on the airship and the fighter also received the message one after another. Machine guns are ineffective. The enemy is extremely dangerous. In fact, without any reminder, Lin En had already seen the shot down Yasuo and Lucia riding a griffin rushing towards this side. I don't know if it used some secret method, but the griffin under the opponent was extremely fast, and its wings had already left after images, and its speed had even caught up with the airship. This should be the saint of the church, right? Herv narrowed his eyes, and then said with appreciation, "She is so courageous that she caught up with him alone." Lin En was also a little surprised, although he knew that after solving the fire dragon and griffin in the air, the legends of the church would definitely take action. He did not expect that only Lucia would catch up with him. This was inconsistent with his previous plan. The unknown is the most frightening. Let the fighters retreat first, Lin En said solemnly, and soon sent out the order in the form of electromagnetic waves. After receiving the order, several nearby fighters immediately began to turn back and gave up their plan to besiege the opponent. Their ammunition and fuel were almost consumed, and they were no longer able to fight. P.S. Chapter 2 is around 3 o'clock. Chapter 423 Legendary Magic, Rain of Stars. Lucia, who was driving the griffin, naturally noticed these fighters speeding in the air. In her divine vision, the polarization magic that could achieve visual invisibility had no effect. The maximum speed is actually over 300 kilometers per hour. Lucia quickly estimated the opponent's speed by the change of the fighter in the air. If it were energy, a speed of only 300 kilometers per hour would naturally not be a big deal, but in its current state, these new alchemical creations might really pose some threats. A divine light appeared in Lucia's palm, and she was ready to leave all these new alchemical creations here. But the next moment, the fighters turned their course and evacuated in different directions. Escaped? Lucia frowned slightly, but she didn't bother chasing anymore. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed to the sky. The brilliant divine light instantly spread out and shot straight into the sky, illuminating the entire sky. The powerful fluctuations of divine magic made Lin En and others, who were 1 kilometer away, stand on end. Then, under their gaze, countless bright stars fell from the sky. Is this a meteor? Herv looked solemn. He felt a strong sense of danger from the falling stars. Notify them, take precautions, and move forward at full speed. We must leave here immediately. Lin En also realized that something was wrong and ordered immediately. The starlight covered an area of 3 kilometers. The extremely fast fighter planes rushed all the way and successfully left the area before the starlight fell, but the slower airships were not so lucky. The falling starlight immediately showed its terrifying power, easily piercing and melting the special leather of the airbag, and even the wizards on it were no exception. The protective magic on their bodies was weaker than paper, and they soon melted in the exploding sparks. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 airships crashed. The damage caused by this attack alone was much stronger than the harassment and breath of the fire dragon. This is the legendary magic, Star Rain. The airship where Lin En is also within the range of Star Rain, but the difference is that all of the starlight is blocked outside by the space barrier created by Herv. However, they are unable to rush to the aid of the other friendly forces, and can only watch the airships drowned in the starlight. Just after resisting Star Rain, Herv didn't have time to breathe for a moment, because Lucia, who was driving the griffin, was less than 200 meters away from them. This means that the opponent has entered the range of the laser. The pilot responsible for controlling the beam device immediately launched an attack. Lin En on the side immediately thought of something, but there was no time to stop it, because the speed of light was too fast. At the same time as the button was pressed, a strong laser beam flew out, aiming directly at Saint Lucia. At a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second, there is almost no possibility of dodging. But Lucia didn't think about dodging. She had seen this kind of strange laser before, so it was impossible not to be on guard. A transparent curtain appeared in front of her, and the red laser seemed to pass through the water, deviating from the side of the saint, and then Lucia opened her mouth and said, "Counter." The moment the voice fell, the transparent curtain immediately became solid, and the light on her body quickly deflected the angle, drew a beautiful arc in the void, and turned to cut towards the airship. Fortunately, when Lin En realized that something was wrong, he quickly pulled out the ruby used to cast the laser, and just in time to stop the spell when the light deflected, avoiding the risk of them being killed by their own magic. He had talked about the intelligence that the Saint of the Holy See could crack laser magic with her aura and others at the discussion meeting, and the pilots of these airships were obviously not qualified to listen to that meeting. Star color. Lucia spoke again, and the boundless starlight appeared around her body, like a long river in the sea of stars, rushing towards the huge airship. Neither Lin nor Herve dared to be negligent in the face of such a strong power, and they all used the most powerful protective magic. Space barrier. Immortal barrier. The endless river of starlight was weakened layer by layer under the barrier of force field magic, and then collided head-on with the rising immortal fire, erupting with a deafening roar. The starlight and the raging fire intertwined, and the heat wave caused the airship 100 meters away to shake violently. Lin and Herve were both horrified, because Lucia, who was riding the griffin, rushed out from the bright starlight and the endless immortal flame. What kind of monster is this? Lin was stunned. Lucia's body was covered by the immortal flame. The chlorine trifluoride that was so powerful that it could devour all known elements seemed fake, and had no effect on the Saint Lady at all. No, that's not right. This is an illusion. Lin reacted immediately and reminded loudly. It was not his flame that was fake, but Lucia herself. Since it was just an illusion that broke out of the immortal barrier, where was the other party's real body? The next moment after he opened his mouth, the airship, which was originally only shaking slightly, began to sway more violently, and then the entire cockpit made an unpleasant creaking sound. Both the floor under his feet and the guardrails around him were rapidly cracking. They were actually crushed to pieces. As for the people on the airship, they had already fallen from the guardrails and escaped the fate of being crushed into pieces. Lin En was no exception. He escaped from the crushed airship and was falling towards the ground at a very fast acceleration. He was not worried about being killed by the fall. He was promoted to a great wizard and mastered force field magic. He could fly in the air without any support, but the speed was relatively slow. This would not be considered a weakness under normal circumstances, but it was different now, because in his sight, Lucia was already riding a griffin and rushing towards this side. "Have you chosen me as your target?" Lin En's face was solemn. He didn't know whether this was lucky or unfortunate. Perhaps it could only be described as an honor. Lin En's mind moved, and groups of immortal flames flew out, blocking the opponent's approach. The rolling heat waves generated by the explosion once again accelerated his descent. However, Lin En knew that this would only slightly block the opponent at most. His eyes quickly fell on the ruby he had taken from the airship before. "Then let's try this." Whether the 5th level laser can break through the incomplete reflective mirror and overcome the biggest flaw of laser magic has always been a question that Lin En is exploring. Although it has not been verified yet, under the critical situation, he can only take the risk and try it. Chapter 424, Breaking the Limit. The reflector was cut. 071. Turn on overload mode. Lin En muttered in his mind, then put his hands together, and the ruby spun rapidly in his palms. At the same time, his mental power was also rapidly improved. 4 rings, 5 rings, 6 rings. The computing power of the magic network was quickly mobilized, and the feeling of overflowing mental power came to his mind again. However, unlike the last time, Lin En did not feel the splitting headache, but instead felt as if he had broken through some obstacles, and his brain was clear. In fact, during the defense of the capital, Lin En had already felt the realm of a hiring wizard in advance, and took 2 bottles of legendary potions in succession. He was only a little short of accumulation and taking this last step to be promoted. Now, With this opportunity, Lin En naturally broke through to become a 5-ring wizard, and truly mastered the computing power provided by the magic network. This is undoubtedly a pleasant surprise. However, at this moment, he no longer cared to check his current state through the intelligent brain, and devoted himself to the release of the magic. There was only one thought left in his mind, that is, compression, compression, and compression again. In the invisible black curtain, the ruby that absorbed a lot of energy trembled violently, as if it would burst in the next moment. The spell that took more than 2 minutes to prepare was shortened to 3 seconds by him. Lin En's forehead was also covered with fine beads of sweat, and then he roared, "Break it for me!" The closed reflective layer instantly cracked into a hole that was finer than a hair, and a bright beam of light shot out from the black curtain, piercing through the sky and the earth in an instant. When Lucia saw through the opponent's preparation for the laser spell, she had already condensed the water curtain surrounding her body into a ring-shaped reflector. The speed of light was so fast that even she could not effectively dodge it. The only way was to reflect it, or even bounce it back. However, at the same time as the laser beam was shot out, Lucia, who was in the protection of the reflective mirror, vaguely sensed a sense of crisis, but it was too late. The speed of light was faster than the speed of neuron conduction. At the moment she sensed the danger. The laser beam, which was thinner than a hair and brighter than starlight, had penetrated the reflector and pierced her body in an instant. Then the beam quickly turned and cut down the body along with the griffin under its feet. In the void, the circular reflector reflecting the firelight shattered with a bang, turning into a sky full of lenses falling down. Should it have hit? This thought flashed through Lin En's mind. At this moment, he didn't care to check his results, because now he was less than 10 meters away from the ground. Even if the force field magic and the slow fall spell were activated together, it would be difficult to completely offset the impact of falling straight down from 1,000 meters in such a short distance. Lin En fell hard and rolled on the ground for several times before he relieved the impact, but he still felt a dull pain in all parts of his body. If it weren't for the fact that the cells in his body had been soaked in magic power, coupled with the buffering of magic, he would have been smashed into a pool of meat paste. Drops of blood rain continued to drip on this wasteland. This was certainly not Lin En's blood. Its owner soon fell from the sky. It was a griffin that was cut in half. The internal organs and blood flew out during the fall and sprinkled into the sky. Lin En's sight just swept over and gathered to the other side. The figure of the Holy Lady Lucia of the Holy See appeared in front of him and landed smoothly from the sky. Did the laser miss? This doubt came to Lin En's mind, but he quickly rejected it, because there was a trace of blood flowing on the left arm of the Holy Lady in front of him, dripping continuously on the ground. The holy robe worn by the other party was also cut open, extending from the left shoulder to the right leg, but the robe did not fall down, as if it was glued together by some force. I think the internal body should be similar. The whole person was split in half but still looked like nothing happened. This half-dead state can only be described as terrifying. Lucia seemed to have just noticed the abnormality in her body. Her slender fingers gently stroked the broken part, and the cut injuries were completely restored. Is it an illusion, or immortality? Lin En frowned slightly. He had encountered this thorny problem when he was fighting with Edwell. The opponent seemed to be immortal, and even the injury of dismemberment was not fatal. According to their speculation, this may be related to the secret of promotion to legend. Good magic, Lucia said with appreciation, and then turned to look at Lin En and asked, "Can you tell me how it works?" She was very interested in this strange beam magic before. I thought it just used the principle of focusing and refraction of light, but after the experiment, she found that it was not that simple. There must be a deeper secret in it. Why? Do you want to learn magic? Lin En was quite surprised. If he remembered correctly, according to the Bible, magic belongs to the power of the devil. The soul of the person who uses this power will be gradually polluted, and he will go to hell after death. Not every high-ranking official in the church is so conservative, Lucia said with a chuckle. If you are willing to sacrifice your faith, I will let the Pope personally baptize you and let you step into a higher realm, the realm of true legend. Forget it. Lin En shook his head and said directly, the church's high-level officials may be closer to true legends than the speakers like Hov, but they must be subject to great restrictions. Maybe even their lives will be controlled by others, which he will never tolerate. However, Lucia's words also made Lin En's heart a little alarmed. Does a saint of the church really have such great power to pardon him, a claw of the evil demon, and even order the Pope to baptize a wizard? What a pity, Lucia said regretfully. In these hundreds of years, this is the first time she has felt a sense of cherishing talent, but it seems that the other party really does not understand romance. What a pity. A cold laugh sounded in this desolate land. You should think more about yourself. As the voice fell, dozens of chains composed of alchemical runes rose from the ground, tightly bound Lucia's legs, and then extended to her body. In less than a second, the saint of the church was tied up tightly. Vittorio, who had just spoken, emerged in the night, and the figures of Aurora and Rev also appeared around, faintly surrounding Lucia in the center. Chapter 425. She is Saint Lucia. With the arrival of the three speakers, the situation on the battlefield was reversed instantly. Lucia was tightly bound by the chains made of alchemical runes. Her face remained unchanged, and she spoke indifferently. It seems that your target is not kerosene. Of course we have to take the kerosene, but only after we deal with you. Rev responded with a sneer. Their airships were not flying randomly just now, and going to the kerosene land was just a cover. The importance of oil is self-evident, but because of this, that place cannot be used as a battlefield. Why is there only one person? Where is the presiding judge? Vittorio was very surprised. According to their previous plan, Lin En and others would find a way to lure the two legends of the Holy See and solve them together. It's not bad to deal with this one first. Aurora's eyes showed a hint of smile. If it was 4-2, something might go wrong. If the enemy broke through by force, it would be difficult to deal with. But now it's 4-1. The advantage is mine. Aurora thought so, but soon she noticed something was wrong, because the saint of the church in front of her was too calm. Even when she was surrounded by them and bound by Vittorio's alchemy, she didn't show the slightest worry on her face. Is this all your plans for tonight? Lucia said with some disappointment. The fact that these wizards were not targeting kerosene was indeed beyond her expectations. But Vittorio and others who hid here using polarizing magic in the alchemy array arranged underground could not hide from her perception, but she didn't care much. For her, whether it was one person, 4 people, or 10 people, there was no difference. Since we are all here, let's solve it together. Lucia's eyes became very cold, and a terrifying divine wave surged around her, and the chains that bound her body tightly trembled violently. Projection. Divine Kingdom. The huge hymn resounded in the night sky, and then the grass and trees on this barren land soared, and the winding vines broke out of the ground, destroying all the alchemy arrays arranged on the ground. Lucia floated up, her eyes gleaming with star-like brilliance. The chains that bound her body broke instantly, and all the areas visible to the naked eye, the entire wasteland, turned into a land promised by God in an instant. Lin En stepped back quickly, but was still included in the kingdom of God. What shocked him the most was that the other party did not use the holy word when he opened the kingdom of God. Before, when the other party used the power beyond the cardinal, it seemed that he did not pray in advance like Edwell. In an instant, all the information gathered in his mind, and the previous confusion was suddenly solved. You are not the saint of the church. Lin En's pupils shrank slightly, and then he said decisively, are you, Ella, that false god? In the entire church, there is only one person who has the ability to order the Pope to baptize the evil wizards and mobilize the power of the kingdom of God without using the holy word. That is Ella, the god believed in by the church. What? Rev. Vittorio and Aurora all looked at the floating Lucia in shock, and reacted after Lin En's reminder. According to their intelligence, a saint who was selected from the nuns, rotated every few years, and lived in the holy city with luxury could never have such power. Perhaps it was some kind of method similar to the descent of God. What made the hearts of several people even colder was that the other party was conscious and had a very sharp mind, which was completely different from what they had imagined before. This was undoubtedly the worst-case scenario. Have you found a way to eliminate the poison of faith? Vittorio asked word by word. His expression was both horrified and full of desire. The method of becoming a god through psychic faith, That is a shortcut to a higher realm, a road that they had abandoned. The biggest obstacle is the poison of faith. It will corrode people's will and completely assimilate themselves into the gods imagined by believers. Lucia didn't care about the title of false god. She looked down from above, her star-like eyes scanned the four people around her, and finally focused on Lin En, saying coldly, "This is the last chance. It's not too late to regret now." What responded to her was the immortal flame that appeared around Lin En. The meaning was already very clear, only fighting. Although the development of things has been somewhat out of control, all their arrangements are for this battle. There is no reason to surrender before the war. Lucia didn't say much, since she couldn't use it. It was a threat that must be eliminated. As for those alchemical creations and various novel spells, she would naturally search them out from the minds of these people. The battle is about to start. Proof took the lead, and the time and space around him twisted. With a slight sound like glass breaking, the black silk thread quickly spread in the projection of the kingdom of God, and the field collapsed and the grass and trees collapsed wherever it passed. This is the legendary magic of the force field system, blade of time and space. At the same time, the destroyed alchemical runes on the ground silently spliced into shape, and locked onto Lucia from all directions. Lucia looked indifferent, allowing the chains and the invisible blade that cut through time and space to pierce her body and be sucked into the vortex of space. At this time, Aurora warned anxiously, "You are attacking an illusion, be careful, Vittorio. Her real body is on your right." Vittorio's heart had also sounded a warning. His domain was compressed by the kingdom of God to less than 3 meters around his body, and his perception ability was greatly weakened. At some point, the figure of Saint Lucia had appeared beside him, and her right hand with the glory of divine magic had passed through the protective magic he set up. A fear that went straight to the depths of his soul surged in Vittorio's brain. His strong sixth sense made him realize that he would be dead if he was hit. Fortunately, Lin En and others had reacted, and a strong laser beam flew past. Although he could no longer instantly activate the 5th level laser after losing the ruby as a support, and there was a risk of it being reflected back, Lucia did not dare to gamble on this probability. Layers of water curtains appeared around him, deflecting the beams at several angles, but she also lost the chance to kill Vittorio. Great disintegration technique, finger of death. With the joint efforts of Roof and Aurora, the layers of water curtains immediately collapsed, and the strong laser beams slashed out again. Vittorio also took this opportunity to distance himself and escape from the opponent's control. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.